Hello everyone. I am the storyteller. Tonight I'm going to tell you a story that winds its way through old mortar and fresh blood, a thing that moves like smoke under a locked door, whispered at midnight and kept between the pages of ledgers no city clerk will touch. Most folks shrug it off as local superstition, the kind of tale traded over beer to keep tourists spooked. I don't. I lived it. It began the night I took a job guarding an empty fortress on the edge of Philadelphia, a place tourists call history and the stones call hunger. Eastern State Penitentiary looks like an institution on a brochure by day, tours, placards, lights, but after sundown the prison remembers its other purpose. It remembers the men who learned too late that rules are not for safety but for survival. It remembers that something older than order lives in the mortar, a god of iron and appetite who keeps time with the scrape of chains. So relax. Let the distant traffic fade. Hear the wind lift along the yard wall, the small sounds that mean something is turning. This is a story about rules, the ones they hand you on a clipboard, the ones the dead hammered into stone, and the ones a god will invent for you when he borrows your throat. Keep your eyes on the page, and whatever you do, don't look away. After my little brother died, I couldn't stay in the city. Every corner of Philly felt like it had him in it, the stoop where we smoked our first cigarette, the deli where he used to swipe tasty cakes, even the alley by our row house where he got jumped once and came home bleeding but grinning like it was a badge of honor. I thought I'd drink myself into the ground or fight until someone put me down. Instead, I just walked out of everything. Quit my warehouse job. Stopped answering calls. Spent a couple months sleeping on couches until people got sick of me. That's how I ended up looking at job postings at 3 in the morning, scrolling past nonsense scams until one jumped out. Overnight security, Eastern State Penitentiary, $28 per hour. Immediate hire. Minimal requirements. I'd been to Eastern State once on a Halloween tour years back. Fake blood, cheap scares. The real history was worse: solitary confinement, torture under the name of penitence. A place built to grind men down until the only thing they had left was prayer. Still. $28 an hour. No background check. No references. I called. They picked up on the second ring. A man with a voice like gravel asked me 2 questions. Can you show up tonight? Can you follow written guidelines exactly as they're written? I said yes to both, and he told me to report at sundown. No paperwork. No orientation. Just a name to ask for, Mr. Greaves. They didn't call them rules. He said he'd give me the guidelines I'd need to follow. Eastern State at night doesn't feel like Philly. The city noise dies the second you pass the outer wall, 30 feet of stone that look older than they are, like someone hauled them out of a medieval ruin. Inside, the air is stiller, heavier. The front gate creaked open without me touching it. A single floodlight lit the yard. I half expected to see tourists in costumes, but it was just me in silence. A man stepped out from the shadows by the admin building. Thin, sharp shoulders under a wool coat too long for him. He carried a clipboard. You're the new one. His eyes flicked over me, already bored. Good. We'll keep this simple. That was Mr. Greaves. He didn't shake my hand. Just shoved a stapled packet against my chest. These are the guidelines. You follow them, you go home in the morning. You don't follow them, he let the sentence hang, and the silence of the penitentiary filled it in. I thumbed through the packet under the floodlight. 10 items. Typed in courier, like something from an old police file. The guidelines. 1. Do not enter cell block 12 between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. under any circumstances. 2. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. Accelerate your pace until the sound stops. 3. Should you encounter a man in uniform carrying a spear, salute him. Do not speak unless spoken to. 4. Every hour on the hour, walk the perimeter of the yard. Do not cut corners. Complete the circuit. 5. If you pass by cell block 5 and hear shouting, recite aloud, conflict is eternal, but I am not its servant. 6. The radios will sometimes pick up transmissions. Answer only if the voice identifies itself as Commandant. 7. Do not attempt to use your phone. It will not work inside the walls. 8. If the siren sounds, kneel and cover your head until it stops. Do not look up. 9. In the event you encounter a man bleeding but still walking, do not assist him. Step aside. Let him pass. 10. At dawn, report back to me before leaving. Do not exit the gate until dismissed. I laughed when I finished reading. Couldn't help it. It read like some horror story off Reddit. Mr. Greaves didn't smile. Don't laugh, he said flat. Not here. Not under his gaze. Whose gaze? I asked. He didn't answer. Just pointed me toward the flashlight clipped to the wall, the two-way radio on the desk, and the keys on a hook. Midnight shift starts now. God help you if you think this is a joke. The penitentiary is a corpse. Long corridors with vaulted ceilings, peeling paint, and cells like honeycombs rotting from the inside out. The flashlight beam only cut so far, and beyond it, shadows stretched like waiting mouths. At first, nothing happened. Just creaks, drips, rats scattering ahead of me. I did the perimeter walk like the paper said, circling the yard slow. The stone walls loomed higher from inside, like I was at the bottom of a well. Around 12:30, I cut through the main corridor. Cell block 12 loomed at the far end, its gate chained shut, a sign bolted crooked, "Do not enter." The guideline's first line echoed in my head. Do not enter cell block 12 between midnight and 3. That was when I heard it. Boot steps. Behind me. Steady, deliberate. Heavier than rats. Louder than echoes. Coming closer. I froze. Every instinct screamed to turn around. Shine the light. Confront it. But the rules. Do not turn around. Accelerate your pace until the sound stops. So I walked faster. My boots scuffed, heartbeat thudding in my ears. The footsteps behind me matched pace. I nearly broke into a run. Then. Silence. The corridor stretched out ahead, empty. My breath fogged the beam of my flashlight. When I finally risked a glance back, there was nothing. Just the gate to cell block 12, chained tight. But the air smelled different. Iron. Copper. Like blood left to rust. That was my first night at Eastern State. That was my first lesson, the rules are not suggestions. And if you're reading this because you're thinking of taking the job, stop. Burn the number. Forget you ever saw the posting. Because the man with the spear. He's real. And the war he serves. It never ended. When dawn finally came, I half expected the whole place to dissolve in sunlight, like some bad dream. It didn't. The penitentiary looked worse in daylight. Walls blotched with mildew, paint peeling in sheets, bars eaten orange with rust. The city hummed outside, SEPTA buses grumbling, horns blaring, kids shouting on their way to school. But none of it touched inside these walls. Mr. Greaves was waiting at the desk, exactly where I'd left him. I told him about the footsteps. He didn't ask questions, didn't check for intruders. Just nodded once. That means you followed the guideline, he said. Good. He scribbled something on his clipboard. Didn't explain what. I tried to laugh it off. You got speakers hidden in here or something? Mess with the new hires to keep them on their toes. That was when he looked at me. Really looked. Eyes sunk deep into shadows, like the man hadn't slept in a decade. You think I'd waste men on pranks, he said quietly. No. Every footstep you hear is earned. Someone before you ignored the paper. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. Night 2. I should have walked. Told him to shove the job and found something else, anything else. But $28 an hour gnawed at me, and besides I'd followed the rules once, and it worked. That's how they hook you. Survival feels like understanding. By sundown, I was back at the gate. The floodlight blinked on, same as before. The walls swallowed me whole. The air felt different that night. Sharper. Carried a faint tang like fireworks burned long ago. It happened around 1 a.m. I was finishing my perimeter walk, coming up the east wall, when my flashlight caught a shape ahead. A man. Tall, broad shoulders, silhouette hard-edged. He wore armor. Not like SWAT gear, not like anything I'd ever seen outside a museum. Bronze plates caught the light, dented and scarred. His helmet covered his face, but I saw the red plume cresting the top. And in his hand a spear. I froze. The guidelines screamed in my head, should you encounter a man in uniform carrying a spear, salute him. So I did. Snapped my hand to my brow like some idiot cadet. For a moment, he didn't move. Just stood there, watching me from behind that faceless visor. Then slowly, very slowly he lifted the spear upright, but striking the ground once. The sound was thunder inside the yard. It rattled my teeth. Then he turned. Walked back into the shadows between blocks, armor clinking faint like chains dragged across stone. I stayed frozen long after he disappeared. My hand still at my forehead. At 2:15, the radio crackled. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was just static at first, then a man's voice, low and rough. Report. The rules said, answer only if the voice identifies itself as commandant. It hadn't. My thumb hovered over the talk button. Report, it said again, sharper this time. I set the radio down on the desk. Backed away like it was a rattlesnake. The voice hissed through static a while longer before cutting out. When silence returned, I realized I'd been holding my breath. Near 3, I passed cell block 5. That's when I heard it. Shouts. Dozens of voices layered, screaming, roaring, cursing, like a riot was tearing through the block. Every cell empty. Every door locked. The words came back, sharp as glass, conflict is eternal, but I am not its servant. I said it aloud, voice trembling. The sound in my throat felt like it wasn't mine. And just like that the shouting cut off. Dead silence. The block smelled of sweat and blood. I didn't linger. When Greaves dismissed me, I asked him straight out. What is this place really? He stacked his papers neat, clipped them tight, and said. It was a prison. Now it's something else. Something older. Older than what? He looked at me with those hollow eyes. Older than justice. Older than peace. That was all he said. I don't know why I keep going back. Maybe it's the money. Maybe it's the silence. Maybe it's because when I salute that man in armor, I feel like I've joined something I don't understand, and part of me wants to. But I'll say this to whoever reads this. If the radio calls you, and the voice doesn't say Commandant first, don't answer. Because last night, after the transmission cut out, I swear I heard the same voice behind me. And this time, it wasn't coming from the radio. By the third night, I'd stopped telling myself it was just a job. The guidelines weren't safety procedures. They were survival strategies. And the penitentiary wasn't just a ruin tourists wandered through by day. It was something alive. Something that kept score. When I clocked in, Greaves handed me a second radio. Back up, he said. The thing looked older than me, metal casing, cracked rubber antenna. Why do I need two? I asked. He didn't look up from his clipboard. One's for us. One's for him. I started to ask who him was, but his eyes flicked up hard, sharp. Don't confuse the channels. The air felt heavier that night, pressing on my chest like a weight. The penitentiary's corridors echoed different too. Louder, sharper, like sound wanted to cut skin. On my first perimeter walk, I saw movement in cell block 12. The rules said, do not enter between midnight and 3. But the gate rattled as I passed. Just a shiver of chains, metal teeth grinding together. My flashlight beam skimmed the bars and for a second, I swore I saw a hand slip back into shadow. Fingers black with soot or blood, I couldn't tell which. I kept walking. Faster. It happened at 12:47. Rounding the corner by cell block 3, I nearly collided with him. A man in torn prison blues, staggering forward. His shirt soaked through, chest slashed open, blood dripping steady to the stone floor. His eyes were empty sockets. But he walked like a soldier, straight down the hall. The guideline burned in my head, do not assist him. Step aside. Let him pass. Everything human in me screamed to help. He was dying, bleeding out in front of me. My hand twitched toward my belt for the radio. Then I saw it, every drop of blood steaming as it hit the ground, burning tiny holes into the stone. I pressed myself against the wall. He brushed past, dripping, footsteps leaving black stains. He didn't look at me. Didn't slow. Just walked toward cell block 12. The chains rattled louder when he approached. At 1:30 a.m., the siren screamed. Not a fire alarm. Not police. Older, rawer. Like some war horn torn out of history, loud enough to shake the windows. The guideline, if the siren sounds, kneel and cover your head until it stops. Do not look up. I dropped. Hands over my skull. Heart hammering. But kneeling meant my face was inches from the stone floor, and I saw what was happening there. Cracks crawling out from the grout. Lines jagged and sharp, like veins spreading. And through them light. Red, hot, pulsing. The siren cut out. The cracks sealed, leaving only dust. I didn't move until silence stretched long enough to feel safe. Near 2:45, the radio buzzed. This time, the voice was clear. This is Commandant. Report. Every hair on my arms rose. I pressed the talk button. My own voice came out thin, breaking. Perimeter secure. No incidents. Silence. Then. Good. Hold fast. The campaign endures. The line went dead. My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped the radio. When Greaves dismissed me, I told him what I'd seen: the bleeding man, the siren, the cracks in the floor. He didn't look surprised. Just wrote something in his book. Finally, I snapped. Who the hell is the commandant? Greaves closed the clipboard slow, like he was buying time. He was a general once. Maybe still is. Depends on how you look at it. A general of what? Greaves met my eyes, voice low. Of everything that bleeds. That was the first time I thought about quitting. Not because I didn't believe anymore, but because I did. And let me warn you, if you're ever fool enough to take this job. The guidelines keep you breathing, but they don't keep you clean. Every night I walk those halls, I feel that the penitentiary isn't guarding us from him. It's guarding him from us. By the fourth night, I was already having nightmares. Not the usual kind, either. Not falling or being chased. These were different. I'd dream of boots stamping in rhythm, hundreds of them, shaking the ground. I'd dream of rusted helmets split open, skulls inside still grinning. I'd wake up with the smell of gunpowder in my nose and blood on my tongue. I stopped telling myself it was stress. When I came in that night, Greaves wasn't at the desk. He was out in the yard, staring up at the towers. "Something wrong?" I asked. He flinched like I'd caught him doing something shameful. "No," he shoved the clipboard at me. "Walk your routes. Keep your head down." His hands were shaking when he handed it over. Paper edges frayed like he'd been folding and unfolding them for hours. I glanced at him as I started my first circuit. His lips were moving, like he was reciting something under his breath. Around midnight, I passed through the yard again. That's when I saw them. Figures lined up against the far wall. Dozens. Shadows where no one stood. Helmets glinting. Spears angled. They weren't solid. My flashlight cut through them, left nothing but stone. But the instant I lowered it, the ranks stood tall again. I thought I was imagining it until the air shifted. Hot wind across the yard, carrying the stench of iron and rot. My stomach turned. I remembered the guideline, walk the perimeter. Do not cut corners. So I kept walking. Right past them. Pretending not to see. But in the corner of my eye, I swear one of them turned its head. On my break, I snuck into the admin wing. Tour guides use it for office space during the day, but the old library's still their shelves collapsing, books mildewed, records stacked in crates. I pulled files at random, looking for something that explained the rules. Most were prison reports. Fights in the yard, guards stabbed, riots quelled. One folder dated back to the 1940s had a note scrawled across the cover in red pencil. Cell block 12 sealed permanently. Manifestations increasing. Recommend containment over eradication. No signature. No explanation. I slammed the folder shut. That was when the radio on my belt hissed. "This is Commandant," the voice said. "Why do you linger?" My mouth went dry. I was checking records," I stammered. Static flared, like laughter dragged through barbed wire. "You seek history. History is war. All men are conscripts. Even you." Then silence. The library smelled of smoke. Old, battlefield smoke. I didn't check another folder. Near 2:30, the spearbearer appeared again. Same armor, same slow stride. This time, he didn't vanish into the shadows. He stopped in the middle of the yard. I saluted. My hand shook so bad I nearly jabbed myself in the eye. He didn't return it. Just stood there, breathing hard through his helmet. Then he spoke. Not in English. Not in anything I'd heard before. Harsh syllables, sharp like blades clashing. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the intent. It was a command. I stood there frozen, not sure if obeying would save me or damn me. Then, mercifully, the siren howled. The yard split with red cracks, the ground itself screaming. I dropped to my knees, covered my head, and when the noise cut out, the soldier was gone. When I reported back, Greaves looked worse than ever. His coat hung loose, face pale, eyes bloodshot. "You went into the library," he rasped. I started to deny it, but he cut me off. "You shouldn't dig. It doesn't matter how many records you find. The story doesn't end. Not for him." "Who is him?" I snapped. Greaves' jaw clenched. Then he whispered, almost like a prayer. "The god of slaughter. The patron of blood. The one who never stops marching." He didn't say the name. But I already knew. Ares. If you're reading this and thinking I sound unhinged, I wish I was. Crazy would mean it's in my head. But crazy doesn't leave footprints in the dust, and I saw them clear as day. Rows of them. Marching in step. The guidelines keep me alive. But they don't tell the whole truth. And the truth is, Eastern State isn't haunted. It's occupied. By the fifth night, I wasn't the same person who walked in on day one. I'd stopped checking my phone during breaks. Stopped eating on shift. Stopped thinking about outside at all. When those gates clanged shut behind me, there was no Philadelphia. No buses, no laughter, no world beyond the walls. There was only stone. Marching shadows. Blood in the cracks. And him. Greaves looked worse than ever when I arrived. Shirt wrinkled, coat stained, eyes raw like he'd been crying. He pushed the clipboard toward me but didn't let go. His hand trembled. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered. I didn't answer. "Of course you do," he said, voice breaking. "Everyone feels it by the fifth night. That's when he starts choosing." "Choosing what?" I asked. Greaves let go of the clipboard. He turned away, muttering. "Whether you'll march with him or against him." Around midnight, I heard it. Not footsteps. Not chains. Drums. Low and steady, rolling through the stone. Like a warband gathering in the yard. My ribs vibrated with each beat. I followed the sound to the north wall. The drums grew louder, until the mortar itself began to crumble, fine white dust falling in sheets. Shapes bled through the cracks, hands gripping spears, boots grinding forward. The wall didn't separate us anymore. It was a thin curtain, and on the other side, an army waited. Then, just as sudden as it began, the drums stopped. The wall stood whole again. But in the dust at my feet, a single word had been traced. March. At 1:45, I patrolled past cell block 7. That's when the chanting started. Not shouts this time, chanting. Deep voices rising and falling together, syllables like weapons clashing. The guideline burned in my mind: if you hear shouting from the cells, recite the words. Conflict is eternal, but I am not its servant. But this wasn't shouting. This was liturgy. I whispered the words anyway. My voice cracked halfway through, throat dry as bone. The chanting stopped. And every cell door rattled once, in unison, like a salute. He came again at 2:10. Bronze armor dented, red plume swaying, spear glinting under floodlight. But this time, he didn't just pass. He turned to face me. I saluted, hand stiff against my brow. He raised his spear, then pointed it at me. My knees nearly buckled. My heart thundered so loud it drowned out thought. He barked something in that foreign tongue again. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. Fight. The urge hit me like fire under my skin. I wanted to grab something heavy. Swing it. Break bone. Spill blood. The hunger came fast, so fast it scared me. Then the siren screamed. The cracks opened. Red light spilled from the stone. I dropped to my knees, covering my head, shaking all over. When the sound stopped, he was gone. But the hunger wasn't. I told Greaves everything. The drums. The word in the dust. The chanting. The soldier's challenge. He listened without looking at me. Finally, he said. You lasted longer than most. What's happening to me? I asked. He finally met my eyes. His own were red, raw. You're not just guarding this place, he whispered. You're being drafted. I should have quit. I should have walked away and never looked back. But if you've ever stood face to face with a god, you'll understand, it isn't that simple. Ares doesn't just visit. He conquers. And he's already marching in me. By the sixth night, I didn't need the walls to tell me when it was coming. The air itself grew heavy, like the whole prison was pulling me into its chest. Breathing took effort. Even walking felt wrong, like I was marching to someone else's cadence. And worst of all, the hunger hadn't left. That deep, gnawing desire to strike, to hurt, to win. It lingered even when the prison was quiet. I'd catch myself gripping the flashlight too tight, knuckles white. Or standing in the mirror of the guard booth, jaw clenched, eyes cold, whispering a word I didn't even know I knew. Pulmos. War. At 11:50, I cut across the central yard. The snow was patchy, wet, and red. Not blood rust flakes from the bars above, washed down with last week's rain. At least that's what I told myself. But then I saw footprints. Bare, wide, deep. Dozens of them, circling each other. As if two armies had met in that yard, locked in a standoff. I froze, staring. The snow melted under my boots, the rust flaking into something darker. For a moment, I heard the clash of shields. The roar of men. The whistle of arrows. Then silence. Just my breath clouding the night. I backed away, one careful step at a time. The first time it spoke inside me, I thought I was losing it. You will not run. Not out loud. Not through my ears. Through my bones. The words vibrated in my ribs, in my teeth. You will not hide. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispered the only defense I had, conflict is eternal, but I am not its servant. But the words sounded weak. Thin. And his voice answered, amused. You already are. At 1:30, I saw someone in the hall. Not the soldier this time. Not bronze, not plume. A prisoner. He shuffled forward in striped uniform, eyes hollow, wrists chained. His skin was gray, but his chest heaved with life. I thought he was an echo, another ghost locked in his cell. Until he spoke. They made us fight down here, he said, voice broken. Made us tear each other apart. Entertainment for the warden. Sacrifice for the god. I swallowed. Which god? The prisoner smiled. His teeth were broken, jagged. You've met him. Then his neck snapped sideways, like something invisible grabbed his head and twisted. He crumpled to the floor and vanished. Only the chains were left. At 3 o'clock, I checked the mirror in the staff bathroom. I wish I hadn't. My reflection wasn't me. Same face, same body, but the eyes were wrong. They burned. Gold and red. They looked at me the way a hawk looks at a rabbit. And when I lifted my hand, the reflection didn't copy. It saluted. I didn't tell Greaves everything this time. Just enough to test him. There was a prisoner, I said. Said the warden made them fight. Said it was sacrifice. Greaves' lips pressed into a thin line. Don't listen. They're not prisoners anymore. They're bait. Bait for what? For you, he whispered. And that was when I realized Greaves wasn't just warning me. He was preparing me. Not for survival. For service. I'm starting to think I wasn't hired as security at all. I was recruited. And every night, every drumbeat, every whisper of blood in my teeth, I feel the draft pulling tighter. This isn't a job anymore. It's a war. And I'm not sure whose side I'm on. By the 7th night, the prison stopped pretending to be a prison. I don't mean the tours, the cracked walls, the history lessons, I mean the stone itself, the way it held itself. Something shifted. The cells didn't feel like confinement anymore. They felt like barracks. The air carried the scent of sweat and steel. The corridors echoed with bootfalls that weren't mine. And everywhere I looked, I saw lines forming. Invisible formations. Phantoms slotting into rank. The penitentiary wasn't housing ghosts. It was housing an army. It started in the yard again. The snow was gone, though I knew damn well it had been there that morning. Instead, mud slicked the ground, churned with footprints. I watched as figures emerged from the fog, hundreds of them. Men in rags. Men in uniforms. Men in armor that clanked with every step. Their faces were empty, their eyes hollow. They stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting. And in the middle of them all, I saw him. The soldier with the plume. His armor gleamed brighter than before, like the fire of a forge was trapped inside. He raised his spear high, and the army answered with a roar that rattled the glass in the guard booth behind me. I saluted. Automatically. Like my body wasn't mine. He nodded once. Then the yard emptied. Mud to snow. Silence where there had been thunder. I shouldn't have gone in. But the door was open. The old warden's chair sat behind the desk, leather cracked, wood splintered. A heavy ledger lay open, pages stiff with age. Names filled the columns. Row after row, written in dark ink that bled at the edges. But the ink wasn't ink. It was blood. And the last page wasn't filled with prisoners. It was filled with guards. I saw my own name at the bottom, written so fresh the blood hadn't dried yet. Around 2 o'clock, the prison erupted. Not literally, but in my head, in my body, it might as well have been. The siren wailed, but this time it wasn't mechanical. It was a horn. Long, low, mournful. The hall split in two before my eyes, stone peeling back into a trench on one side, a barricade on the other. Figures spilled from the cells, not as prisoners, but as soldiers. Rusted rifles. Blades dripping. Helmets dented, shields cracked. They screamed as they charged each other. I pressed against the wall, clutching my flashlight, whispering the words, "Conflict is eternal, but I am not its servant." But the ground shook. Mud splashed. Bullets whined past my ears. One soldier stumbled into me, bayonet raised, and froze. His eyes locked on mine, hollow but knowing. Then he dropped to his knees. Bowed. The rest ignored me, tearing each other apart. When I blinked, it was gone. Just empty cells. Just quiet stone. But my boots were still caked in mud. I found Greaves in the control room before shift ended. His hands trembled as he lit another cigarette, ash falling into his lap. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked. "The battlefield," I said. He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for it. "That's when most guards quit," he said. "When they realize the penitentiary isn't haunted. It's occupied." I stared at him. "By who?" Greaves smiled, teeth yellow, eyes wet. "You know who." I should have been relieved when the sun broke. But even outside the walls, the streets looked different. The people on the sidewalks didn't look like commuters anymore. They looked like soldiers moving to positions. The city itself felt like a battlefield waiting to ignite. And when I looked at the reflection in a shop window, I didn't see myself. I saw a uniform. Armor gleaming. And Ares behind me, smiling. I think the war isn't trapped in Eastern State anymore. I think it's leaking. And I think I'm the one carrying it out. By the 8th night, I stopped wondering if he'd come. It was just a matter of when. The air was wrong the moment I stepped through the gate, charged, restless, like a storm waiting to break. Even Greaves didn't hand me the clipboard this time. He just muttered, "Stay steady," and walked away. Stay steady. Easy for him to say. My whole body buzzed like a live wire. It hit at 11:42. I was crossing the corridor by cell block 5 when my right leg moved without me telling it to. One step. Then another. I froze, trying to stop. My mind screamed no, but my body didn't listen. My boots struck the floor in perfect rhythm, heel to toe, like marching in formation. I gripped the wall, forcing myself still. My breath came ragged. My heart slammed against my ribs. And through clenched teeth, my mouth whispered a word I didn't choose. Phalanx. I ducked into the staff bathroom, splashed cold water on my face. The mirror shook. My reflection grinned, lips curling too wide. You were made for this, the voice rumbled, echoing in my skull. I've marched men softer than you. Cowards. Traitors. But you. My hand slammed into the sink, hard enough to crack porcelain. I hadn't moved it. You'll spill blood well. I clutched the counter, whispering my line, desperate. Conflict is eternal, but I am not its servant. The reflection laughed. My mouth didn't move, but the sound came from my throat. You already are. Around 1:15, I patrolled past cell block 9. One prisoner stood at the bars. Not a ghost this time, solid, breathing. His eyes tracked me. Fight him, he said. Don't let him take you. I froze. You can see it. The prisoner shook his head. No. I can feel it. He's in your blood now. In your fists. Before I could answer, his head snapped back, skull caving like an invisible hammer struck him. He collapsed, body limp, blood pooling fast. I rushed to the cell. But when I blinked, he was gone. No body. No blood. Just empty stone. And my hands were slick. Red. At 2:33, he tried to take everything. It started in my hands, fingers twitching, curling into fists. Then my arms locked at my sides, shoulders squaring, chest puffing out like a soldier at inspection. My boots marched forward without command. My lungs filled deep, bellowing air like I was about to scream. And then my throat roared. Not words. Just sound. The sound of battle. The hall answered. The cells rattled. Invisible soldiers pounded their weapons against stone, chanting in rhythm with my stolen voice. I fought it. Dug my nails into my palms until they bled. Bit my tongue till iron filled my mouth. Finally, something cracked like tearing cloth. My knees buckled. I fell, gasping. But even on the floor, I heard it, his laughter, deep and endless. When the shift ended, Greaves was waiting by the gate. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He just pressed a flask into my hand. Drink, he said. I did. It burned worse than fire. Why me? I asked. Greaves' eyes looked hollow, empty. Because you're still fighting, he said. That makes you useful. I don't know how many more nights I can hold him back. I feel his hand on my shoulder. His fingers in my jaw. His hunger in my chest. And when the war finally breaks, I don't know if I'll be guarding this prison or leading his army. By the 9th night, I stopped trusting my own senses. Not because of shadows or voices, those I could handle. Those had rules. But now, the rules themselves bent like warped metal. The words slipped in and out of my mind, sometimes clear, sometimes scrambled into languages I didn't understand. I knew what that meant. He was inside. Pulling strings. And I was fraying fast. At midnight, I walked the east corridor. Every step I took echoed not once, not twice, but dozens of times, like a whole company of boots marched with me. I froze. The echoes froze too. Then they kept walking. Past me. Through me. Figures blurred in the corner of my eyes, helmets, shields, torches blazing. They didn't look at me, didn't break stride. Just marched into the dark, into a war I couldn't see. And for a heartbeat, my chest swelled with pride. Like I belonged to them. Like I should fall in line. My hand twitched up to salute and I bit my lip hard enough to draw blood, forcing it down. But the taste of iron didn't feel like punishment. It felt like victory. At 1:30, I ducked into the booth to steady myself. The phone rang. It hadn't rung once since I started this job. I lifted the receiver, pulse hammering. Static hissed. Then a voice came through, low and guttural. "Report." I didn't answer. "Soldier," the voice barked. "Report." My throat moved without permission. Holding position. The words didn't come from me. They came through me. The line went dead. At 2:15, I checked the bathroom mirror again. Not me this time. Someone else. A prisoner, face battered, eye swollen shut. He leaned close to the glass, whispering like it was a secret meant only for me. "He'll burn you out. Use you till nothing's left." I swallowed. How do I stop him? The prisoner's smile split bloody lips. "You don't." His head slammed into the glass from the other side. The mirror spiderwebbed. I stumbled back, clutching my flashlight. When I looked again, it was just me. And I was still smiling. At 3 o'clock, the siren wailed. Not the usual long note, but broken jagged bursts, like screams cut short. The wall cracked wide. Light poured through, not red this time, but gold. Blinding. Through the crack, I saw soldiers kneeling, helmets low, waiting for command. And then I felt my arm rise. My hand extend. Not to salute. To point. And they surged forward. I don't remember the rest of the night. All I know is I woke in the guard booth, uniform torn, knuckles raw. Mud tracked across the floor in perfect boot patterns. And Greaves was staring at me like I'd already become one of them. "You led them, didn't you?" he asked, voice flat. I couldn't answer. My throat was shredded. He didn't wait. Just lit another cigarette and whispered. "Welcome to the war." The worst part? I don't even remember saying yes. But something in me did. By the 10th night, I understood what this place really was. Not a prison. Not a museum. Not even a haunted relic. It was a proving ground. And I was being tested. It started in the rotunda. The lights flickered out all at once, plunging the whole hub into black. My flashlight beam cut across stone and found Greaves. Except it wasn't Greaves. His body was stiff, rigid. His eyes glowed faint gold. He held a nightstick like a spear. When he opened his mouth, the voice that came out wasn't his. "Hold the line." He charged. I barely got my baton up in time. Metal cracked against metal. The impact rattled my bones. We circled each other, striking, blocking, moving like soldiers on a field. I didn't want to fight him, but every strike he threw forced my hand, every step I took pulled me deeper into rhythm. Until I wasn't just fighting. I was enjoying it. When I disarmed him, sending the baton skittering across stone, he dropped to his knees. Not like a man defeated. Like a soldier submitting to command. And then his body collapsed. Empty. Greaves was gone. In cell block 7, another waited. A prisoner, shirtless, scars crisscrossing his chest. Shackles still hung from his wrists, dragging along the ground. His voice was a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. "Prove your strength." He came at me barehanded, but every punch landed like steel. I swung my baton, but he caught it midair, snapping it in two. My fists clenched without my permission. My legs moved in brutal rhythm. Every strike I landed broke flesh, split skin, shattered bone. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. When he finally hit the ground, he looked up at me with blood filling his teeth. And he smiled. Then he vanished. By 3 o'clock, the whole prison changed. The walls peeled back. The corridors widened. Torches burned where electric lights should have been. The ground was dirt, churned and bloody. I stood in the center of an arena. Thousands filled the stands, prisoners, guards, soldiers, strangers. Their faces were shadows, but their eyes blazed. And above them all, high on a throne of shattered stone, sat the god of war. Ares. His armor burned red, plume dancing in a wind I couldn't feel. His eyes locked on me, bright as molten gold. He raised his hand. Another figure stepped into the arena. It was me. Or something wearing me. Same face. Same uniform. Same eyes. But his smile was cruel, eager. And I knew, without a doubt, what Ares wanted. He wanted me to kill myself. The arena vanished with the morning bell. I woke in the rotunda, both halves of my baton still clenched in my hands, knuckles bloody, jaw aching. Greaves found me there. His voice was hoarse. Now you see. He doesn't just want to break you. He wants to forge you. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because deep inside, something whispered back. And it's working. By the 11th night, I knew I wasn't guarding a prison anymore. I was guarding a war. And the war had come home inside me. It happened in cell block 4. The air thickened, walls sweating, stone bleeding in slow rivulets. My boots stuck in mud that shouldn't exist indoors. And then he stepped out from the end of the hall. Me. Every detail perfect from the crease of my uniform to the scar on my chin. Except his eyes. His eyes glowed with that molten gold, alive with a fire I'd been fighting to resist. He raised his baton. My baton. And grinned. You're wasting his gift, he said. He chose you. And you cower. We ran at each other. Steel cracked against steel. Sparks flew where no sparks should. Every strike was mine, every block, every parry. It was like fighting a mirror that wanted me dead. But he wasn't just faster. He was cleaner. Stronger. Every move I thought of, he executed sharper. He fought without hesitation, without fear. And deep down, I envied him. He shoved me against the bars, baton pressing into my throat. Why do you resist? He hissed. The war will outlast you. The blood will flow with or without you. Why not stand with him? Why not command? I gasped, words strangled. Conflict is eternal, but I am not its servant. He laughed in my face. You already serve. Every time you swing. Every time you bleed. You're his soldier whether you say it or not. And for a second, I believed him. The fight dragged through corridors, into the rotunda. Doors slammed shut around us, locking us in. He moved like fire. I moved like ash. He pinned me again, baton raised for the final strike. Submit, he said. One word, and you're free. I thought of the prisoners. The guards. The faces of men who'd already bowed, who'd already broken. And I spat blood into his eyes. He howled, and in that instant, I drove the broken half of my baton into his chest. He staggered back. Looked down. Then smiled. Good, he whispered, before dissolving into smoke. I collapsed in the rotunda, breath ragged, body trembling. Greaves found me there, like always. He didn't help me up. Just crouched, staring into my face. Did you win? He asked. I shook my head. I don't know. Because my knuckles were still bloody. My uniform was still torn. And when I looked in the broken glass of the booth, my reflection didn't look like me anymore. It looked like him. I don't know if I killed my double or if I let him in. And I don't know which one of us walked out at sunrise. By the 12th night, it wasn't just shadows and whispers anymore. It was me. My voice. Leaking out of my mouth when I swore it wasn't mine. It began on rounds with Torres. He was chewing sunflower seeds, flicking shells across the cracked tile, when he stopped mid-step. "Hey," he said, frowning. "You hear that?" I hadn't spoken a word. But he tilted his head toward me like I had. "You just said," he swallowed. "You just told me to break his jaw before he looks at you like that again." I froze. I didn't say. But Torres was already backing away, like I'd grown horns. It happened again in the break room. Peterson was slouched on the couch, whining about overtime, when suddenly his coffee mug shattered in his hand. Blood everywhere. I hadn't touched him. But the moment he winced, the words crawled out of my throat like oil. Pain is weakness leaving the body. And the way Peterson stared at me like he wanted to obey, like he liked the pain, made me sick. By now I'd memorized the rules. Obey the schedule. Keep the baton close. Don't stand in the rotunda at midnight. But the rules weren't enough anymore. Because the language was changing. My thoughts came in drills, in chants, in war cadence I didn't recognize but couldn't stop. Advance. Engage. Break line, hold ground. No retreat. When I tried to pray, the words twisted. When I tried to sleep, I woke up gripping the baton like a rifle. And in the mirror, my lips moved even when I was silent. Greaves found me outside cell block 12, knuckles split, wall dented from where I'd been striking it over and over without realizing. He didn't scold me. He didn't act surprised. He just lit a cigarette and blew smoke into the dark. "It's starting," he said. I asked him what he meant. He didn't look at me when he answered. "You're not guarding against Ares anymore. You're carrying him. He's working through you. And if you don't learn the last rule..." He paused. "Flick dash. Then he won't need to come here at all. You'll bring him everywhere." That night the penitentiary itself reacted. Sirens wailed though no one touched the panel. Floodlights swung across the yard like search beams. And then the stone began to hum. A deep, thrumming vibration through the soles of my boots, like the walls themselves were drumming to war. The prisoners woke and roared in unison, hundreds of voices chanting words they couldn't possibly know. Arios. 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 The war god's name. Chanted in a language none of them spoke. I staggered to the center of the yard, baton in hand, trying to shout them down. But they weren't looking at me like I was a man. They were looking at me like I was a standard raised high on a battlefield. And in the pit of my chest, something surged, not fear, not dread. Exhilaration. I wanted to command them. I wanted to lead. And I realized, the fight against my double hadn't ended. I hadn't killed him. I'd taken him in. I don't know when Ares will step onto this soil with his own feet. But I know he's already marching through mine. I used to think riots had warning signs, muttering, shivs getting past, guards noticing restlessness. Not this time. This one was orchestrated by something older than men. The chanting from the night before hadn't stopped. It changed. It sharpened. By dawn, prisoners were striking their cell bars in unison, steel ringing against steel, a cadence I recognized deep in my marrow, the rhythm of boots on dirt, of armies on the march. When Torres tried to silence them, he froze, dropped his baton, and muttered. "That it sounds right." He said it like it was a hymn. Cell block 8 burst first. Nobody saw how they got their locks undone, but when the gates opened, 30 inmates poured into the corridor with bare hands curled into spears. Peterson and I rushed in. He raised his taser, but before he could fire, I heard my own voice roar out over them, louder than thunder. "Break them. Leave no retreat." It wasn't me. And yet it was. Peterson faltered. His taser clattered. The prisoners didn't rush me, they parted around me, pouring past like I was their captain. They struck Peterson instead. And Peterson, God help him, didn't even scream. He just nodded like he understood his role. We tried to regroup in the rotunda, but the walls weren't still. They sweated red. Dark streaks oozed down stone like veins pumping from some unseen heart. And in the center, where the sunlight through the skylight should have landed, the stain was black. An outline. A shadow of a man with a spear and a shield. It didn't move. But the prisoners saw it and dropped to their knees. I wanted to, too. My legs trembled with the urge to bow. Greaves grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. "Don't kneel," he hissed. "That's how he wins." I asked him what the hell this was. He finally gave me the word. Phobos. Deimos. His sons. That's who's loose in the blocks. Fear and dread. They stir them up until there's nothing left but war. You can't fight it head on. You gotta outlast it. But how? I asked. Greaves just shook his head. Not all the rules were written down. Some, you gotta learn in blood. By nightfall, cell blocks 8 and 10 were gone. Guards scattered. Radios screamed with static that sounded like shields clashing. And I walked through the chaos untouched. Prisoners parted around me, their eyes wide, reverent. One reached out, touched my hand, and whispered. "General." I should have shoved him away. I should have screamed at him. But instead I gripped his hand back. And the word felt right. Something in me is breaking. Or maybe it's being reforged. The penitentiary is no longer a prison. It's a war camp. And Ares hasn't even stepped fully onto the field yet. It wasn't a prison anymore. It was a siege. The riot wasn't noise. It was music. Bars beaten into rhythm. Voices in unison. The yard thundered like an army on the march. Every corridor echoed with a cadence. Stomp. Stomp. Shout. Even the guards who hadn't fled yet, some of them fell into step. Peterson, his face bandaged, arm dangling useless, was stomping his boot in rhythm, glassy-eyed. By midnight, the inmates had formed ranks. Not chaos lines. Shoulder to shoulder, bare hands clenched, sharpened spoons and broken broom handles raised like spears. And who stood in front of them? Me. I didn't remember walking there. But when I opened my mouth, commands spilled out like fire. Advance. Break line. Hold ground. And they obeyed. Torres tried to break formation. He sprinted across the yard, waving his baton. But the moment he shouted, "This is madness," the prisoners turned. They didn't kill him quick. They circled him. They dragged him down slow, tearing piece by piece like hounds with prey. I tried to stop them. I swear I did. But when I screamed, the only words that came out were, "No mercy. Leave none standing." And their frenzy doubled. That was when the sky itself opened. Not literally, not fully. But I swear I saw the night split like two massive red banners pulled across the stars. Behind them, a figure. Bronze armor. A helm crested with horsehair. Eyes burning coal red. Ares. Not here, not yet. But close. And the prison wanted him. The stones shook like drums to welcome him home. Greaves hauled me into the shadows, shoved me against the wall so hard my teeth rattled. "You're leading them," he spat. "Don't you see? You're not stopping him, you're opening the gate." I didn't. But my voice betrayed me again. Louder than my own throat could carry. "War is holy. War is the only law. Greaves' eyes filled with tears. You've already said it. You've already sworn it. We ran to the rotunda. The black shadow in the skylight was larger now, stretching across the floor. It wasn't just a shadow anymore, it was a seal. A threshold. And the blood smeared on the walls was feeding it. The more prisoners fought, the more guards bled, the wider it grew. Ares was carving his way in with every death. And I didn't know whether to stop it. Or finish what I'd started. The seal in the rotunda pulsed like a heart. Every drop of blood fed it, widened it. And I could hear him on the other side. The god of war, rattling his spear, whispering my name. Greaves had always been calm, even when the dogs barked at nothing, even when the walls wept red. But now he looked afraid. No, worse. He looked resigned. I didn't want to tell you, he said, voice raw. Not unless you proved you could handle it. He grabbed my collar, forced me to meet his eyes. There's one more rule. He pulled a crumpled scrap of paper from his pocket. The handwriting was jagged, like it had been scratched down during an earthquake. It read, Rule 8, when the seal opens, you must spill your own blood before his. If Ares tastes only the blood of others, he enters. If he tastes yours first, the gate rejects him. I stared at the words. My gut twisted. That's it? I asked. Cut myself and it's over. Greaves shook his head. Not a cut. Not a scratch. A sacrifice. He doesn't want wounds. He wants loss. Something you can't walk away from. I felt the walls groan around us, stone grinding against stone. The seal was spreading across the floor, swallowing the light. And if I don't? Greaves looked at me like I was already gone. Then he walks through you. And when he does, Philly isn't the battlefield. The whole damn country is. In the yard, the riot had collapsed into slaughter. Prisoners cheered, bleeding, laughing through broken teeth. Guards screamed. And I stood at the edge of the rotunda, baton slick in my hand, the rules repeating in my head like a litany. Stay in the light. Don't answer the voices. Don't linger at the rotunda at midnight. Keep your baton close. If you see yourself, don't let him speak first. Never feed the dogs after sundown. Lock every gate twice. And now. When the seal opens, spill your own blood first. I picked up a shard of glass from the floor, slick with someone else's blood. My hand shook. My chest heaved. Somewhere beyond the skylight, the bronze helm tilted down toward me. And I swear he smiled. I don't know if I'll have the strength to follow that last rule. Because for the first time in weeks, I don't want to stop him. I want to see what happens if I let him in. I should have done it. I should have dragged the glass across my arm, across my chest, anywhere. But I hesitated. And hesitation was all he needed. The seal in the rotunda didn't just widen, it shattered. Like a mirror under a hammer, cracks split across the floor, radiating out in jagged lines. Each fracture bled light, not white, not yellow, but a molten red that stung my eyes. Through it, a hand emerged. Bronze gauntlet, fingers tipped in spear points. The air stank of iron and smoke as he pulled himself through. Ares. Not a vision. Not a shadow. Here. He didn't roar. He didn't thunder. He whispered. Right into my ear, though he stood 30 feet away. Rules are for soldiers. You are no soldier. You are mine. And just like that, the paper in my hand curled black and burned to ash. Rule 8 erased. One by one, the other rules warped. Stay in the light became extinguish the light. Let darkness march. Don't answer the voices became obey the first command you hear. Don't linger at the rotunda at midnight became stand at the rotunda. Await orders. Keep your baton close became raise it as your standard. If you see yourself, don't let him speak first became repeat his words. Amplify. Never feed the dogs after sundown became let them feast. The pack must grow. Lock every gate twice became tear them down. Leave no barrier standing. Every safeguard, inverted. Every barrier, ripped open. The prisoners poured in from every block, not screaming now, but chanting. Their voices struck in rhythm, words older than any tongue they'd ever spoken. Arios. 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 Ares raised his spear, and the penitentiary answered. The walls shook like drums. The windows rattled like shields. And me. I couldn't tell if I was terrified, or exultant. Because when he pointed that spear at me, I raised my baton in answer. Greaves shouted over the roar. You're the key. He can't march without a commander. Cut yourself now, it's still not too late. But Ares' eyes burned into mine. And I knew, if I bled, I'd lose him. If I didn't, I'd lead an army. And for one breath, one sickening heartbeat, I wanted to lead. Greaves was still screaming at me. Do it. Bleed now. And Ares just watched, spear raised, waiting to see which way I'd fall. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. But I could move. The shard of glass was still in my fist, digging into my palm. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dragged it across my arm. Deep. Too deep. Blood spilled hot and fast, spattering the fractured floor. The rotunda howled. The seals screamed like stone being split in two. For a second, I thought I'd done it. For a second, I thought he was gone. But it was too late. He was already here. My blood didn't slam the gate shut, it just poisoned it. The light under the floor sputtered, flared, burned brighter than before. Ares staggered mid-step, his bronze form flickering like a flame in wind. Not banished. Not free. Snared. The rules twisted again. Not erased, not inverted, fractured. Stay in the light, stay where the blood fell. Don't answer the voices, choose one voice, silence the rest. Don't linger at the rotunda at midnight, never leave the rotunda at midnight. Keep your baton close, keep it wet with your blood. Every line bent into something crueler. Personal. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about feeding him through me. The riot broke. Not ended, broke. Some prisoners clawed at each other, tearing flesh as if desperate to taste blood. Others collapsed, wailing, rocking back and forth like children. And a few, just a few, turned their eyes to me, not him. Like they saw something new in me. Not just a guard. Not just a pawn. Something caught between man and God. Greaves pressed his back to the wall, staring at me like I wasn't human anymore. You tied him here, he said, voice low, trembling. You didn't close the gate. You chained it to yourself. He took a step back. You're not security. You're the leash. And when it snaps. He didn't finish the sentence. Ares didn't vanish. He loomed above me, flickering, burning, grinning. And I understood. I hadn't stopped him. I hadn't freed him. I'd bound him. To this place. To me. And I don't know if that's salvation. Or damnation. By the 18th night, the rules were no longer lines on a page. They were muscles in my wrists. Tendons in my neck. Little litters of instruction that woke me before my alarm. They had shape. Weight. Smell. When I woke that morning in the guard booth, my arm ached where I'd cut it. The bandage soaked through by dawn, a dark map I kept rewrapping with trembling fingers. The pain was a clean thing, precise, grounding. It meant something. The world still had edges. Greaves looked at me and didn't ask to see the dressing. He knew the shape of the sacrifice on me already. He also knew, better than anyone, how fragile a bargain like that was. "You bled on the floor," he said, voice thin. "He's tethered. For now." "For now," I repeated, because saying the words out loud made them true for a heartbeat. When the seal had been fractured and I'd bled into its light, the paper rules had folded themselves into my skin. I could feel them, precise and whispering. Stay where the blood fell. Choose one voice, silence the rest. Never leave the rotunda at midnight. Keep the baton wet with your blood. And the others, corroded but present, like relics. They came in cadence, a metronome set against my skull. Half command, half promise. The last rule I hadn't been given in ink became the most immediate: decide. Who will live under this leash? Who will be spared because I said so? Who will feed the gate? Ares had made the bargain intimate. He had taken the cosmic and made it domestic. He had turned a god's hunger into my choices. It started small. Torres, the kid who'd laughed too loudly the first night I worked with him, came to the booth with a face white as the underside of a moth. "Someone in Block 6 been moving the contraband," he said. "I think one of them's got a knife." Instinct said call backup. Procedure said isolate and contain. The new rules in my blood said something else: choose one voice, silence the rest. My mouth moved. It wasn't entirely mine. "Bring him to the yard," I said, voice low. "Let him answer there." Torres obeyed like a man walking to a funeral. He went and came back with a prisoner on a chain, eyes bulging, jaw clenched. No one called for a trial. The prisoners in the yard formed a ring without anyone telling them to. They wanted the performance. The guard in me, the old, practical code, argued, "This is illegal, this is unsafe." The other voice, the one that tasted like iron and thunder in my tongue, said, "Break him. Make it be known." I told Torres to hold the gate. I stepped into the ring. What I remember is sound, a dozen voices, a chant rising like wind into sails. The prisoner fell and the ring closed, and there was a spatter of red like someone had flicked a brush in the air. Someone, maybe me, gave an order and the men took it as law. In the control room, the video feed showed a dozen moving shadows. The log would later read, "Disturbance contained." It would never show the look in Torres' face when the prisoner stopped moving, or the way Peterson pressed his palms flat to his temples and said nothing at all. After that night, the baton smelled wrong. It held my blood and their blood, and the two had blended into something that clung to my skin like guilt. People began to defer. Not only prisoners. Guards. Even Greaves would lean in and nod when I muttered a command in that other cadence. Power is cheap when someone else craves to be ordered. It's cheaper when they want the ordering more than they want air. The penitentiary's heartbeat quickened. The kids who ran the day tours started staying away, citing unforeseen maintenance. Reporters called and were told the site was closed for emergency repairs. The city sent a couple of men in suits who walked the perimeter once and never came back. It was as if Eastern State had become a private wound. And me? I started dreaming in commands. I woke some mornings with my throat raw, words half-formed, form the left. Hold the gate. Spill, spill, spill. I would force down breakfast and drive my teeth into the inside of my cheek to anchor myself. Hold the center, the old rational voice kept trying to reassert itself like a leaking dam. Not everyone was willing to be a piece on his board. Not everyone bowed. Peterson, he who had bled in the yard and then stood blank, staggered into my office one afternoon and slammed his hand down on the desk. He started, then stopped as the cadence rose through the room like heat. He swallowed it. "I don't want to be your general," he said, voice shaking. "I don't want to be anyone's puppet. He looked at me the way an addict looks at a known dealer, equal parts rage and pleading. For the first time since it began, I felt the old me flare up, bright and animal. A human reaction, fury at what had been done in my name. I could have told him to shut up and lock him in solitary and fed him what the penitentiary asked. I could have bitten the vein in my arm and flung the blood outward and made it so. Instead I closed my eyes. I clenched the baton until the blood warmed the wood and then the leather strap, and I did something stupid. I told him the truth. I don't want this either, I said. But I'm tethered. If I move without care, he walks. Peterson's face crumpled. For a long moment we just looked at each other like two men who had survived the same shipwreck. He left. I couldn't tell if he'd gone to quit, to scream, or to kneel. Ares was pragmatic. Gods rarely are. He'd set the parameters and, when they were bent, he adapted. My late, flawed sacrifice had not set him free, but it had given him a hinge. He could lean into cracks. The rules didn't change just by tearing ink. They found new life as doctrines, as whispers that licked at the prisoner's ears. The chant moved like a contagion. It taught rhythms, then phrases, then cues. It taught the inmates that this man-me could give them order that felt like purpose. It taught guards that following that order kept them from becoming bait. When a man who doesn't know what to do keeps repeating the same instruction, people will follow simply to make sense of a senseless world. That's how mobs form. That's how armies are birthed. One night, a woman came onto the grounds. I didn't see her approach. She was small, wrapped in a coat too thin for the city's weather, hair wet from rain. She'd been one of the volunteers who catalogued artifacts for the daytime tours years back, a local historian named May, known for her stubborn curiosity and tea-stained hands. She found me in the rotunda. Not the rotunda at dawn, the rotunda at midnight, under the seal. She shouldn't have been there. She shouldn't have passed the perimeter and the gates. But she had. She'd read something in a scrap of old ledger that didn't make sense to her and followed it to the source. "Please," she whispered. "You have to stop this." I didn't want to. I wanted to tell her to go back, to run, to save herself. I wanted to tell her that the world outside would not be spared even if I bound him here forever. I wanted to tell her I'd been chosen. Instead I did the only small human thing left to me. I reached for her hand. For a second, her fingers closed around mine and she looked me in the eye, and for one glancing heartbeat I could see the man I used to be reflected back at me, steady and real and without brass-colored fire behind his pupils. May didn't say a word. She did something else, quieter, older. She took from her satchel a little packet of leaves, bay, rosemary, something that smelled like her grandmother's pantry, and she pressed it between my palms. "It's old rites," she said. "Not fit for gods maybe. But old men believed in binding things with smell and memory. If you can't cut him, maybe you can confuse him." It was ridiculous. It was tiny. It was human. It rooted me. The smell filled my nose, green, sharp, the smell of kitchens and funerals. It did not banish the god. It didn't have to. It only made a sound in the rhythm head driven into me, a counterbeat. For a breath, the cadence in my head hiccuped. The echoes in the yard stumbled. A guard blinked. A prisoner coughed, as if remembering they had lungs. I knew as she walked away that her herbs would not save the world. But they had bought me something crucial, a pause. A space to choose where to put the next drop of blood. The leash was still there. The baton still smelled of blood. The rules in my blood still insisted. But in that pause, the second May gave me, the old me crawled back enough to make a decision I hadn't allowed myself in weeks. I could continue to be the leash, tighten, command, feed the seal until his whole march was born. I could let the penitentiary be a brand on this city's face. Or I could use what I'd become to make a different kind of order, not one that fed him, but one that kept people alive long enough to find some other way out. Use the cadence to herd and not to slaughter. Use the authority to carve loopholes and corridors, to make corridors that led away from the rotunda instead of toward it. It was a filthy bargain no matter which way I cut it. But it was a decision that required movement. And movement was what Ares demanded of anything that still breathed. I chose to move. I started small. I rerouted a squad from the rotunda and had them sweep the outer corridors. I told Torres to lock the second gate, not break it, which meant fewer prisoners in the yard during the afternoon. I lied to prisoners, to guards, to anyone who asked, saying there were structural concerns and containment procedures that made certain areas off limits. I lied because lies were the only currency I had that could keep bodies whole. The seal still pulsed. His laughter still threaded the night. The rules in my blood still suggested cruelties as obvious remedies. But for now, for the length of a shift, people lived. Peterson stopped staring into space long enough to eat a sandwich in the break room. Torres slept in his car instead of the floor of the staff room. May left a note under my door that read, "Buy a bandage that doesn't peel off in 3 minutes. You'll need it." I tucked the note into my uniform and felt something like gratitude pinch my chest. A human act. A small one. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep this up. Leashes fray. Gods are patient. The rules are in my blood and in the walls and in the way the prisoners chant when the wind hits just so. But I've learned something that scares me more than Ares' spear: the god's presence doesn't only command violence, it sanctifies it. It makes each dreadful thing feel like necessity. Once that happens, the world will follow, because people would rather be ordered than lost. Tonight, when the rotunda lights go down and the seal begins to hum, I will have to choose again. I will have to decide whose voice gets to speak. And I think, for the first time in the war's long night, I will try to make the choice that keeps as many people as possible breathing. Whether that modest, human plan will be enough is another story. The leash in my hand grows warmer by the shift. The rules whisper steadily, hungry for obedience. But I have a handful of bay leaves and a scrap of human stubbornness. That's all I have this hour. And maybe, just maybe, it will be enough to keep us alive until morning. When Greaves came for me that night, he didn't come like a man with a plan. He came like a man who had finally decided he would rather break the thing he loved than let it become a god. We met in the rotunda because of course we did. The seal had swelled to a black ring under the skylight, its edges pulsing like the iris of an eye. The prisoners were quieter than they'd been in weeks, not because they'd calmed, but because they'd stooped to listen. The cadence in my head was a dull drum, constant and close. The baton in my hand throbbed with temperature, catching the weak skylight. Blood had crusted along the leather strap. Greaves didn't say hello. He didn't do any small talk. He walked right up to me and put both hands on my shoulders like he was steadying a man who might topple off a cliff. "You bled wrong," he said. No accusation, more of an observation. Dust from the skylight chimneyed down into his hair. "You bound him to flesh. You didn't close the gate. You gave him a hinge, and the hinge he leaned through." I could feel the old man's breath, city smell and smoke, like a tired furnace. He held something in his pocket, I could hear it clink when he shifted. A knife. The same kind they'd used for kitchen work in the tour houses, thick and ugly. "You know the alternatives," he said. "You remember the last scrap. Rule 8 was supposed to be a clean cut. You made it a chain. If we wait, the leash will snap and he'll go further than Philly. If you don't, I can take you now and end it." He didn't ask if I wanted to live. He didn't offer to save me. He offered one brutal arithmetic: my death might be a different kind of closure. I thought of May and her herbs. I thought of Torres, of Peterson, of the men who'd knelt in the yard because their mouths had been commanded. I thought of the city, the bus stops, the deli, the kid on the stoop who still chewed the same kind of bubble gum my brother liked. I thought of the pamphlet that had lured me here with dollars and a line about minimal requirements. "I can't let you do that," I said. He didn't argue. He simply stepped back, took the knife out of his pocket, and laid it flat on the pedestal in the center of the rotunda between us and the seal. The metal flashed, a little thing, ordinary. It looked ridiculous and godless in that light. "Then help me," he said. "Do it clean. Cut the leash from you, not into you." I had no ceremony left in me. The leather was gritty where my blood had matted it. I unclipped my bandage with an animal's motion, hands shaking so hard the snap stunned my ears. My arm bled dark and hot. The sound of it steady, a life count running out made the seal quiver. Greaves circled the pedestal, whispering under his breath like someone reciting a litany. He'd carried more than rules for a long time, he'd carried a different kind of memory. I'd seen the way his hand lingered on the old files in the admin wing, the way his voice broke when he talked about manifestations increasing in the 40s. He believed in things older than the penitentiary's stone. "May brought herbs," I said. They bought me a pause. They don't do anything to a god. But they slow the rhythm. Greaves hummed. "A pause will do. It'll let us make the cut clean." He nodded at the knife. "Not half measures. No chain. Let me do it." People in the yard quieted like a tide drawing back. I could hear the chant settling into low notes, waiting. The seal pulsed faster. Somewhere deep in the walls, something laughed in that slow, dry way I'd heard since the beginning. I remember the steel kissing my arm. I remember Greaves' hands steady on either side as the blade slipped, shallow at first, then deep. The pain was classical fire that rewired my entire nerve system. The world sharpened. The seal shrieked. Something in its black light flickered like someone had struck a lantern. Blood fell in a single bright bead and hit the floor. For a second, a woman who knows what second, the rotunda held its breath. The seal contracted. It did not close. It didn't slam or banish or roll up and die. It shuddered, then shivered, then tilted like a man recovering from a hard blow. The golden edge of Ares' form stuttered. Then the chant around us broke not into silence, but into discord. Different voices pulled different rhythms. The prisoners faltered. The men who'd taken orders like gospel blinked. The field of coiled violence eased by inches. And Greaves, whose face had been all set and drawn, suddenly sagged. He'd done what he'd meant to do. He tried to sever the hinge, but he hadn't accounted for the cost. The leash between me and whatever lived in that seal didn't snap clean. The tether had been embedded in meat now, cutting the meat didn't pull it free. The chain shortened. It burned. He dropped to his knees. One hand clamped over the new wound in my arm, the other went to his own chest. Blood stained his palm through his glove. He'd made his cut in himself as well, a deliberate, ugly slice along his ribs. I wasn't sure he'd meant to do both. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was penitent or else cowardice. The result was the same, a second flow of red on the stone. The seal recoiled again, faster. The light wavered. Ares' shape flickered like a projection being adjusted. He tilted his head and regarded us both with something like curiosity. It was not indulgent. It was studying a new variable. Then, with a motion that was neither hurry nor mercy, he raised his spear and stalked back through the fractured floor, not into us, not away. He retreated a degree, confined now to a thin outline on the far side of the rotunda's shadow. We had not banished him. We had not broken him free. We had, in the only way I could make sense of it, tethered him a little tighter and also given ourselves a margin. We tightened the chain around him so he could not march out unchecked, and that chain was the two of us bleeding into the seal. Greaves' breathing came in rattles. He smiled at me then, like a man surprised by the sweetness of an apple and the knowledge of its poison. "You used the pause," he said. "You bled. It's not gone. But it's weaker. For now." I wanted to tell him I'd never asked for this weight. I wanted to tell him I'd given my arm and my will, and that the baton in my blood meant something profane and unforgivable. But my tongue felt heavy and foreign. The cadence had not left me entirely, the old rhythm was still in the back of my throat. It wanted orders, not apologies. Greaves coughed, a dry sound, and then leaned his head back until the rotunda's skylight framed his nose and forehead. There was an odd calm in him. Perhaps relief. Perhaps resignation. He had done what he thought was right. He had given the city a margin of time. He died in that rotunda 3 breaths later, fingers slack from my sleeve. I watched it happen because I could not watch. There was blood on his lips and on the leather of the pedestal, and the chant in the yard had become a thin keening, then a howl, then a low keening again. The prisoners wept like children. Some laughed. The guard who'd been nearest vomited and then began to sing, low and steady, a soldier's rhyme. I sat on the floor and felt the world tilt. The baton in my hand hummed faintly, heat moving from the strap through my palm. I had the partial knowledge of 2 things at once, that I'd kept the seal from opening fully, that in another hour, we might have been a city drowned in bronze horses and spears, and that I had done it at an impossible price. Greaves' body lay quiet. May's herbs were still in my pocket, crushed and warm from some earlier, useless motion. Torres found us before sunrise, hands trembling, breath fogging in the cold. He did what any practical man would do. He arranged a blanket around Greaves and clicked his radio until someone told him where the ambulances were. He didn't ask questions. He moved. Later, when the city reports filed their careful sentences, they'd call it a staff emergency and a sudden medical event and outsource the footage to a private investigator. They would not mention the seal. They would not mention the way Ares' shadow had recoiled. They would not mention that the chant had stopped for nearly an hour. For the survivors, the consequences were immediate and vulgar. Greaves was gone. The ledger in the warden's office, the one full of names, was smudged where his blood had dripped onto it. My own name sat there, written in an ink that now looked like rust. There were fewer prisoners willing to march. There were fewer guards willing to obey me unquestioned. The baton tasted like iron and grief. But there was also breathing. People lived that night who would not have otherwise. The seal would still pulse, it would still hunger. The leash would still tug. But for the first time since I'd put on a name tag and walked through the gate, I had a sense, a practical, working sense, that there might be wriggle room. Ares had been weakened enough to be managed rather than to sweep the continent like a plague. May left another note under my door that morning. This one had a sketch, a circle with 3 lines through it and a word in the margin I'd never seen spelled that way before: bind. She had written, "It will not hold forever. But people can learn to slow a god if they keep the cadence small, human. Keep people busy. Herd them away from the rotunda. Build habits that eat time. Simple directives. Not heroic. Not final. Practical. How to occupy an army with chores. How to make an idol grow bored. How to keep people alive until a smarter answer could be found." I wrapped Greaves in a blanket until the medics finally took him away, and then I walked the rounds like a man who had been punched into slow motion. The rules in my blood pulsed, but now they were one bit more complex. Do not let the leash snap clean, and do not feed the seal unless you mean to. Use your authority to keep people breathing. Use your commands to make sense where there is none. That night I issued orders that were lies and small kindnesses. Lock the yard because of a faulty hinge. Cancel the tours indefinitely. Tell the prisoners there would be drills at odd hours so they would not have time to stand and chant. It wasn't noble. It was bureaucratic. It was survival. It worked. This is the thing I want anyone who reads this to understand: gods don't only take through violence. They take through meaning. They make terrible acts feel like duty. You can fight a god with knives and fire, but you can also starve him of the ritual that makes death feel sacred. You do that with mundane orders. With timesheets, with lock-up schedules, with bandages and small tasks that keep hands busy. Greaves bought us a margin with his blood. May's herbs bought us a breath. My flawed cutting bound the god to a shorter leash. None of it is clean. None of it is permanent. Tonight, the rotunda will hum again. The seal will throb. Ares will test us in some new way. The rules in my blood will whisper cruelties as solutions, and I will have to choose, probably badly, but deliberately. I will have to decide who breathes and who is offered as ledger ink. Greaves tried to end me because he thought it was the only clean option. He was wrong about a lot of things. He was right that some deaths change more than one life. He is dead now, and the ledger remembers his name in a smudge. If you ever come to Eastern State and they tell you it's closed for repairs, believe them in one part: they are not telling the truth, because truth will not make it easier. The truth is that a war has taken up a sliver of stone in Philadelphia, and that a handful of us are doing the terrible arithmetic every night to keep that war from spilling out. We trade small cruelties for breaths. We buy time with blood and lies. We keep people alive by lying to them and to ourselves. That is the pattern now. I don't know how long we can keep it. Ares is patient. Gods are patient. But Greaves made a choice. He paid with his life. And for now, that purchase is our only leverage. When dawn came after Greaves, it arrived like any other morning: buses, shops, a city that pretended to be oblivious. But inside the walls, things had changed in ways the tour brochures couldn't print. The rotunda still held its black ring. The seal still pulsed, less eager but still alive. The ledger in the warden's office had Greaves' name smudged by his own blood. My arm ached where the cut had sewn a new fault line into my skin. The baton throbbed like a cheap tuning fork. I felt older by a decade. We did what humans do when something impossible happens: we made work of it. May's herbs and Greaves' wound bought us a margin, and with margins you can build scaffolding. I turned the margin into schedules. Not heroic schedules, banal ones. Drill rosters, fake maintenance checks, water shutoffs, roll call at odd hours. I wrote memos and posted them where no one really read memos, because rules printed and tacked up give rituals less room to grow. Structure, I told Torres when he worked the desk, eyes rimmed with sleep. If they're busy, they can't chant. He blinked slow, like a man learning to operate a new machine. Torres became my right hand in a way he never wanted to. He'd been a kid who'd thought security meant keeping an eye on a camera and maybe breaking up fights. Now he learned to manage bodies like a foreman on a construction site, moving men away from the rotunda, staggering meal times, scheduling work details that ate time. If prisoners were soldiers, I started feeding them bureaucracy in place of battle. Drudgery is a poor god, but it keeps lungs working. We assigned odd jobs that meant hands were busy: repaint the east corridor, inventory the rusted tools, reorganize the kitchen pans. We made prisoners count stones in the yard at dawn and dusk. The chant still fluttered at the edges like moth wings, but repetition of meaningless tasks thinned them out. Men who'd once been ready to bite a throat now spent a morning sweeping a hall while a guard watched and nodded and checked a box on a clipboard. The ritual hunger didn't leave, it only lost volume. The idea was crude and ugly: keep them occupied until someone brighter than me found a way to close the leak for good. For now, survival was low-level crowd management. The city doesn't like anomalies. People notice when a known tourist spot isn't taking visitors and when uniforms are missing from morning shifts. Families called. A reporter asked polite questions that smelled like teeth. The warden, a man who wore his authority like a too-tight suit, made a curt, useless statement about temporary closure. He didn't stay in the building long. The penitentiary was a liability and liabilities get pruned. City inspectors came and left, their clipboards quieter than they felt. Once, a city official in an expensive coat visited and walked the perimeter with two aides who snapped pictures and said phrases that sounded like they were taken from a playbook: safety concerns, structural assessments, indemnity. They didn't ask the right questions. They didn't have to. The walls kept secrets well. People who should have seen things didn't see them because seeing would have required a different kind of responsibility. But the seeped-in war left marks. Delivery drivers refused to come inside after dark. The deli 2 blocks over lost its last late-night crowd. Rumors started that the tours might reopen only as a historical reenactment, with actors people trying to laugh the place back into a museum. The ignorance of the city was a grace, it gave us room. People respond to anxiety by organizing. The prisoners formed a new chain of small command not because they wanted to obey me, exactly, but because someone needed to move men away from danger quickly when the seal whimpered. The men who had once been loudest about the war's righteousness now answered to a small band of practical sorts inmates who could fix a boiler, patch a door, or read a ration sheet. They were not zealots. They were tradesmen. They became, oddly, useful shields. Peterson returned after a week, hollowed out, quieter. He never spoke of the yard except to say we should cut meal lines into halves to avoid mass gatherings. He began to hand out simple tasks and count tools. The first night he did it, he flinched at the rhythm that had once been coaxed from him. May came back too. She brought more herbs and a little stack of photocopies, legal papers about the penitentiary's early funding, maps, ledger entries not yet digitized. She had a habit of collecting scraps she thought were important. She'd been an archivist of neighborhoods before the tours. She began to talk to me in a way different from how the guards did, as if we were partners in a small, shameful thing. She wanted to know more about the seal. She wanted to catalog it like one catalogs a disease. Governing bodies always make bargains with their land, she said one afternoon, hands wrapped around a thermos. They sacrifice things slowly. Aries comes through towns that already had cracks. You reopen the wound, he smells it. It was the sort of thing that fit into the way I'd been patching routines, understand the history, then make small interventions to starve the god's appetite. Aries is not bland. He doesn't fail for being predictable. Once the prisoners were set to work and the cadence in the rotunda thinned, he tried other threads. He reached for memory. The next night the rotunda's black ring twitched, and in the hallway nearest to the warden's office, the ledger, the same book where Greaves' name sat in smudged ink, began to bleed. Not blood now, but memories, like letters loosening and flipping of their own accord. Names replaced themselves with dates. The ink rearranged into lists of battles fought on American soil, names I knew, trench, raid, ambush, nothing to do with the penitentiary's purpose on paper, everything to do with its marrow. The prisoners didn't need to be coaxed this time. A handful simply stopped sweeping and read aloud. Not chants but histories. They remembered in flashes, reciting with relish names and places that had nothing to do with their own lives. The seal found hunger and memory in connection to an idea of war itself, not only in deaths. I countered by ordering the men to recite inventory numbers, serials, counts, replacement parts. Boredom is anti-sacrament. The ledger was replaced or shielded, pages pinned under a glass case. We put wood over the skylight. We tried to block ritual with administration. It worked sometimes. It failed other times. Not everyone agreed with my bureaucratic, moral triage. There were nights when guards I'd once trusted came to me and spat hatred like confetti. "You're a coward," one of them, Morales, said in the smoker's alcove. He'd been one of the men who pressed close to the rotunda and felt the pull of Aries. "You could unmake this. Cut the leash from your throat. Let him march. Let it end." Morales wanted absolution, not delay. He was not cruel, he wanted quickness. It's a common human craving when you're worn hollow. I told him no. I told him the ledger remembered Greaves' name now. I told him that if we opened the seal fully the city would sputter under bronze and iron, and the price for a quick end was millions dead. He walked away muttering. Sometimes the prisoners rebelled, but not because of mythic reason, because boredom flips to fury. One cell block refused to clear rubble. They smashed soup bowls. We had to break up the first small riot with batons and, for the first time in weeks, the sound of law returned, shouting, cuffs, the smell of fear. The seal thrummed angrily the whole night as if warning us that punishment tasted of blood. May became my oddball partner in small rebellion. She unearthed a footnote in a ledger from the 1830s, a note about a private militia that had met on the site before the penitentiary was built. Not a god-worshipping cult, not exactly, but a band of men who celebrated combat as a virtue. The ledger had a scrap of graffiti in the margin, "Where men meet for war, a god may stay." It was the kind of thing archaeologists drooled over, circumstantial, useful for a thesis, not proof. But it meant the site had a lineage. A hole in history where a god might lodge. May suggested a series of small rituals, no sacrifices, no dramatic stagecraft that might reframe the site's energy, cleaning days made into solemn remembrances, a schedule of quiet hours, an inventory of names of men who'd come and gone, read aloud with human voices. She argued we could replace a god's ritual hunger with a human one, less spectacular but more steady. It was the same idea I'd been using with day-to-day chores, only quieter, more intentional. It was hopeful and faint and not remotely guaranteed. We tried it once, at dawn. We gathered prisoners who could read and guards who would volunteer, and we read the ledger names aloud. Not as chant but as names, clumsy, human. The rotunda shivered as if listening. For a half hour the seal felt like a bruise, tender but not about to burst. I slept for the first time in months and dreamed of nothing but counting tiles. Still, the leash tugged. At night, the rules in my blood whispered suggestions that delighted in cruelty. They were no longer merely rules on a page, they were seductions. They'd tell me how to streamline protection at the cost of dignity. They'd offer clean math, sacrifice 1 to save 10, sacrifice 10 to save 1,000. The cadence could be used for kindness or for slaughter. I started measuring each order by whether it saved a life that otherwise would have been snuffed that night. That calculus is ugly. It makes you small. It trades in halves. I made bargains I'm not proud of. I lied to men who trusted me because if they believed a repair crew was coming they'd not gather. I told a mother in the visitors center that her boy had been moved to a different block because we needed him for a routine shower. He was alive 3 hours more because of that lie. Greaves' death made those choices possible. He'd purchased a margin with his blood. I spent it like a miser trying to keep the furnace going. There were signs the leash was fraying even as it tightened. The prisoners who'd been most fervent about the war now confided in me, sharing fears not of battle but of boredom and of loss. They wanted routine the way plants want water. When the routine bent, they snapped. They looked at me with a mixture of reverence and resentment, like men witnessing a preacher who had become a bureaucrat. On the edges of the city, rumors seeped out. A contractor who'd been sent to inspect the roof swore he'd seen men moving like soldiers in the courtyard at night, but he told his wife to forget the business and never filed anything. The city councilman asked for further clarification and dropped it. Civil authorities preferred silence to truth. All of that was grace. It gave us time. I have not grown heroic. I have only grown practical. The rules are still lodged in me. The baton still ticks against my palm like a faint metronome. The seal still hums. Ares still lifts his head sometimes and glances our way with the impatient stare of a predator who's had his path blocked. But for now, we have a method: keep bodies busy, keep rituals small, expand the list of mundane tasks until the hunger learns boredom. May catalogs, Torres organizes, Peterson counts, I issue orders that are petty and necessary. We use the power I now have not to sate the god but to protect the many small human things that make a life tolerable: a clean mug, a warm blanket, a child's letter folded into a pocket. It is not a story for heroes. It is the work of janitors and clerks and tired men who discover that the only weapon against a god that feeds on meaning is to flood him with meaning that is banal and incessant: paperwork, drills, inventory, names read by trembling voices. There will be nights the leash jerks and I will have to decide who gets a reprieve and who does not. There will be nights I will choose badly. I am not naive enough to promise anything but the attempt. Tonight I will put out a new schedule and tape it to the board. I will place Torres in charge of bread distribution at dawn, which will keep dozens of hands at work for an hour. I will ask May to bring a list of names we can read aloud. I will tell Peterson to check the locks personally. These are small, lousy things. They are not the stuff of ballads. But they keep men breathing. For the time being, that is enough. If Ares comes for another breach, we will have to choose again. If the leash snaps clean, it will be on my hands. If it holds, it will be because we learned to convert hunger into habit. The rotunda hums softly now as I write this, like a throat that purrs between words. The baton lies on the desk, warm with memory. The ledger sits closed beneath glass. Outside, Philadelphia hums its city life and has no idea of the weather we keep at bay within a ring of stone. We are making time. It is a poor victory, but it is ours. The first sign wasn't dramatic. No spear, no chant, no blaze of light. It was subtle, almost polite. The baton went cold. For months it had been a furnace in my palm, a steady pulse that kept me from forgetting what I carried. That night it went dead, like the hum of a fridge unplugged. I dropped it on instinct, expecting a sear. Instead, it clattered like ordinary wood and leather. That was when I knew Ares was testing me. He'd learned patience. We'd built our scaffolding of chores, drills, and schedules, but scaffolding only works if everyone agrees to climb it. One inmate, Harker, a wiry guy with tattoos that looked like maps, simply refused. He didn't scream, didn't riot. He just sat in his bunk, staring at the wall. When Torres ordered him to sweep, he smiled faintly and said, "Not today." The refusal spread like mildew. 3 others sat with him. Then 5. A small, quiet refusal that smelled of contagion. By midnight, half the block was still, humming low under their breath. Not the chant. Something else. Waiting. May was the one who saw it. She brought me the ledger after lights out, her hands shaking. "Look," she whispered. The ink hadn't bled this time. It had erased. Whole lines of names vanished, leaving only pale indentations. Not smudged, not crossed out. Removed. And in their place, faint words appeared. "The leash is slack." I felt it then, deep in the marrow, like a rope being yanked from the other side of the world. My breath caught. My pulse synced to something that wasn't mine. The baton on the desk trembled. The rotunda's black ring pulsed faster, like a pupil dilating. I didn't need anyone to explain. Ares wasn't content to be tethered anymore. He was pulling. Testing. Not to break the leash but to drag me closer. If I gave an order now, it wouldn't be mine. Torres stood in the doorway, face pale. He must have felt the same current, even if weaker. "You're different," he said carefully. "You look at me like you're about to tell me to." He cut himself off. Shook his head. "Don't." His hand hovered near his belt, not for the baton but the sidearm we weren't supposed to use inside the walls. For the first time since this started, Torres wasn't looking at me like his anchor. He was looking at me like the threat. May whispered, "Fight it. Anchor yourself. Order something harmless. Now." But I knew the trap. If I gave a harmless order under Ares' pull, and it worked, it would prove the leash ran both ways. He could use me not just for sacrifice but for anything. If I stayed silent, the pressure would mount until someone else broke. 2 choices. Speak, and risk becoming his mouthpiece. Stay silent, and let the leash snap tighter around the others. I opened my mouth. My tongue felt like bronze. And I told myself I wouldn't. That I'd hold the silence, bite my tongue bloody if I had to. But the leash doesn't ask. It tightens. The weight built in my chest until my ribs ached, until my throat buzzed with words that weren't mine. I tried to choke them back, God, I tried, but they spilled out anyway. Stand. One word. Flat. I didn't even raise my voice. And every prisoner in the block obeyed. Chairs scraped. Beds creaked. Harker rose first, then the rest. Even the sick ones, even the ones cuffed to their bunks, wrenching bolts free with sudden strength. Torres swore under his breath, drawing his sidearm. May clutched the ledger to her chest like it was a Bible. And me? I just stood there, my blood cold as iron, my voice ringing in the air long after the word died. They didn't move after they stood. Didn't riot, didn't charge. They waited, back straight, eyes glassy. Like soldiers awaiting a second order. The leash pulsed through me again, demanding the next command. My tongue tingled, words shaping without thought. March. I bit down hard enough to taste copper, and the word burned in my skull like a migraine. The prisoners twitched, shifting on their feet, straining forward as if held back by invisible chains. Not yet. Not until I spoke. May whispered at me, voice sharp, urgent. Don't. If you give them 2, it's over. 1 word fine, maybe it's survivable. But 2? You'll never pull back. Her eyes were wide, almost wild. You'll stop being you. You'll just be his tongue. The hammer clicked back. Torres had the pistol aimed square at my chest. Better dead than a general for him, he said. His hand was steady. He'd already made peace with it. And I couldn't blame him. Prisoners stood waiting, bodies trembling. May begged me to hold the silence. Torres begged me to make him pull the trigger. And Ares? Ares was laughing in the dark between heartbeats, whispering. 1 more word, and they are yours. 1 more, and the war begins. My tongue moved. I wish I could say I resisted. That I held the silence, let Torres put a bullet in me, let the whole nightmare end right there in that block. But the leash doesn't offer mercy. It doesn't bend. It strangles until you give. And I gave. March. It slipped past my teeth like a prayer, quiet but absolute. The response was instant. The prisoners snapped into motion, boots hammering in unison against the concrete. The sound wasn't just loud, it was ordained. A drumbeat pounded through the block, through my chest, sinking to my pulse. They moved as one, a tide of bodies flowing toward the rotunda. Not rioting. Not raging. Marching. They didn't scatter when they reached the open floor. They didn't bolt for the gates. They lined up in perfect ranks, shoulders squared, eyes locked on me. Rows of hollow men, waiting for their general. Torres cursed, his gun still drawn, but he couldn't fire. Not into that silent, ordered mass. May scribbled in the ledger, her hand frantic, trying to record every shift, every pulse of new law, but the ink bled faster than she could write. My body isn't mine. My arm rose. Not the baton this tiny bleeding hand. They mirrored me. 100 arms lifted, fists clenched, bloodied where they'd bitten their own knuckles raw. I tried to drop my hand. Couldn't. Tried to scream stop. Couldn't. The leash had wound itself bone deep. I wasn't giving orders. I was translating his. Ares filled my skull, molten and merciless. Lead them. First through stone, then through flesh. The prison is the training ground. The city is the battlefield. He showed me flashes, Philadelphia streets drowned in marching feet, walls crumbling like paper, blood painting the Schuylkill red. And at the center, his general. Torres' gun pressed to my temple. His voice was ragged but steady. I'll end this right now. 1 pull, and the leash breaks with you. May's voice cut through, desperate. No. If he dies like this, It won't break, it'll spread. To all of them. She gestured at the ranks. He's the cork in the bottle. Shoot him, and the bottle smashes. The prisoners stamped in rhythm, the walls shaking with each beat. My hand hovered in the air, my throat burned with the weight of a third word I hadn't spoken yet. Torres' finger tightened on the trigger. May clutched the ledger like it was her child. Ares laughed inside my bones. And me? I didn't know if I wanted Torres to fire. Or if I wanted to give that third word and see how far the march could go. Torres' hand shook, finger hard on the trigger. May's voice cracked, begging him not to fire. The leash burned through me like a wire pulled red hot. And then it happened. I didn't wait for Torres. I didn't resist anymore. The word tore out of me like a wound opening. Break. It was as if every wall in Eastern State detonated inward at once. Concrete split. Steel doors ripped from hinges. Barred windows exploded in showers of glass. The prisoners surged, not in chaos but in unison, stamping the broken ground into a single rhythm. Their chant filled the ruins. Arios. 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 They didn't hesitate at the gates. The doubled locks that once kept them in fell apart like rusted wire. Hundreds poured into the night streets of Philadelphia, marching in ranks through Fairmount like they'd been waiting their whole lives for the order. Sirens wailed almost immediately. Police cruisers skidded into the intersection, then were flipped like toys by bare hands and iron will. It wasn't a riot. It was a war column. And I was the point of the spear. The gun went off. I heard the crack in my skull more than my ears. But it wasn't aimed at me. Torres had turned the barrel on himself. His body dropped hard. His blood. Ares roared approval inside me. And Torres rose again, eyes red as embers, falling seamlessly into step with the column. May didn't run. She stood in the rotunda, flipping through pages that bled and erased themselves faster than she could turn them. Her voice broke as she read aloud the new rule etched in crimson across the spine. The leash is no longer held. The leash is the chain. The chain is the army. The war has begun. I stepped outside into the night air. The city smelled of gasoline and old brick, of fear already spreading on the wind. The column parted for me, prisoners and revenants alike bowing their heads as I passed. And for the first time, I understood the full weight of the leash. It wasn't holding him back anymore. It was holding me to him. And he wasn't whispering commands now. He was laughing, because he didn't need to. Every word in my throat was his. The column marched east, a tide of bodies heading toward Center City. Sirens chased us, but the leash drowned out everything: police radios, barking dogs, even my own conscience. I should tell you what I saw out there, but this isn't about me. Not yet. This part belongs to May. May stayed behind. She stood ankle-deep in rubble, dust falling from the rafters like snow. The ledger pulsed hot in her arms, its spine breathing, its pages shivering as if alive. For the first time, she wasn't just writing in it. She was arguing with it. Stop erasing. Stop twisting. Listen to me. Her pen scratched across the bleeding paper, carving words into ink that fought back, letters writhing like worms. New rule: the leash can bind again. The page spat black across her face. The words blistered, then vanished, leaving only a mocking echo. Too late. But May wasn't finished. She bit her thumb, pressed blood to the margin, and wrote again in red. Amendment: the leash must choose one master. The ledger hissed, spine cracking. Her blood smoked on the page. But this time, the words didn't vanish. They stayed. Weak, trembling, but real. May sagged against the broken desk, sweat slick on her forehead. She knew what it meant. Not break the leash. Not destroy it. But force it to declare allegiance. Her hands shook as she wrote the last line, almost blind with pain. It cannot hold both God and man. The rotunda went still. The black ring pulsed slower. The walls groaned, but didn't collapse further. And far away, marching through the streets, I felt it. Like a blade pressed to my throat. The leash had been given an ultimatum. It would choose. May dropped the pen. Her voice was barely a whisper as she spoke to the ruined air. If it chooses him, he'll burn the city. If it chooses you, you'll burn instead. She didn't know if I'd ever hear her. But the leash did. And it laughed. The march reached Broad Street. Neon signs buzzed overhead, storefronts shuttered, sirens circling closer. The column didn't break pace. Cars screeched into intersections, blocked off avenues. The prisoners moved around them, through them, over them like water cutting stone. And me? Every step felt less like mine. The leash was testing. Pulling in both directions at once. Ares pushed through me like wildfire, hungry for conquest. He wanted blood, wanted soldiers, wanted the city kneeling before his bronze shadow. Every command he pressed into my throat carried the weight of inevitability. But May's amendment had teeth. It whispered back, choose. You cannot serve two. The leash trembled between us. One heartbeat, Ares was in command. The next, the chain slackened, and for the first time since the rotunda, I felt my own voice rise in my chest. A wall of cruisers blocked the avenue. Officers in riot gear formed up, shields locked. Their bullhorns barked warnings, but the column didn't stop. I raised my arm. His gesture. But my throat burned with my words. Ares roared, crush them. I rasped, hold. The leash spasmed. The army staggered, jerking mid-step, some collapsing as if strings had been cut. The clash of wills rippled down the ranks. And for a heartbeat, silence. The leash didn't like silence. It bucked inside me, tearing marrow, shredding muscle. My vision blurred bronze and red. Then it spoke. Not in my head. Through all of them. Prisoners screamed, voices unison, guttural and terrible. Choose. I fell to my knees. My blood ran hot from every pore, like the leash was clawing its way out of my skin. If I chose Ares, I knew what happened. The city burned. If I chose myself, maybe May was right. Maybe the leash would incinerate me where I knelt, a clean break, and leave the column masterless. But there was a third thought. A darker one. What if the leash chose neither? What if it chose to exist for itself? The column stamped once, the sound like a cannon. Shields rattled, police flinched. Ares howled, demanding blood. May's faint voice carried across the tether, begging me to resist. And I felt the leash tighten into a single thread. Hot. Absolute. It was about to decide. It didn't go to him. It didn't stay with me. It split. The leash curled back like a serpent shedding its skin. All the blood I'd given it, all the words I'd spoken, all the weight of Ares pressing through me peeled away. And what rose wasn't God. Wasn't man. It was the leash itself. Bronze threads unspooled from my veins, weaving into a body of blood and rust. Chains slithered into the street, knotting into limbs. Its head was a featureless helm, its eyes empty sockets that bled smoke. The army, his army snapped to attention. Not for me. Not for Ares. For it. The leash had stopped being a chain. It was a commander. Ares screamed through the tether, his bronze form flickering in rage above the city like a mirage. He lunged to seize it back, but the leash only laughed, a dry metallic rasp that shook the asphalt. I felt the absence like frostbite. For the first time since the rotunda, my throat was mine. But it was hollow. Empty. Like I'd been carved out and left behind. May's voice crackled faintly through the tether. "Oh, God. You didn't win it. He didn't either." It had wrote itself a new rule. The ledger bled black across her hands as the words scrawled themselves. The leash obeys no hand. The leash is war itself. She dropped the book, shrieking as smoke poured from its spine. The leash raised its arm. Not mine. Not his. Its own. The prisoners surged forward in perfect ranks. The police line broke in seconds, shields shattered, bodies flung against cruisers, guns useless. And above it all, the leash's empty helm tilted toward me. It didn't see me as its master or prisoner. It saw me as the first loose end it hadn't yet cut. Ares bellowed inside my head, "You fool. You made war without a god." And May, her voice faint over the smoke, "Run. You can't fight it. It's not bound to you anymore." But I couldn't run. My knees locked. My blood still remembered. And the leash was coming for me. The leash didn't march. It didn't stride. It glided. Chains screeched across asphalt as it slid toward me, its bronze and rust body flexing with movements too smooth for something made of scrap. Every prisoner under its command froze in place. They didn't breathe, didn't twitch, didn't live until it gave them the signal. I realized then, the soldiers weren't real anymore. They were extensions. Shadows given bodies. War puppets strung up by the leash itself. "Run!" May screamed from the smoke. My body obeyed her before my mind could argue. My boots pounded down Fairmount Avenue, the penitentiary walls still looming behind me like jagged teeth. The leash followed, its chain limbs tearing grooves in the street. Every car alarm it passed wailed in sympathy, lights flickering, glass shattering. The leash didn't chase like a predator, it pursued like inevitability. Ares' voice clawed through my skull, half fury, half disbelief. "You gave it blood and silence. You let it taste command. Now it makes itself a sovereign." His voice cracked like thunder. "If it takes you, it will learn hunger. And when war hungers, cities fall." I stumbled across the trolley tracks, nearly went down. Behind me, the leash scraped a dozen rusted spears from the air and hurled them. They pierced asphalt where I'd just been, glowing orange with heat. May's voice buzzed through the tether again, her words jagged, forced. "Listen to me. The leash isn't obeying the old guidelines anymore. It's rewriting them as it moves. That's why the soldiers stop and start it's issuing commands like a god. Not like a tool." I gasped for air, ducked into an alley. "So what the hell do I do?" Her silence stretched. "Then, survive long enough for me to find the next rule it writes. If we can catch it while it's fresh, maybe we can." Static swallowed her voice. The leash entered the alley without turning sideways, its body twisting unnaturally thin to pass between the walls. Its helm bent down to me. No features. No eyes. And yet I felt it smile. It raised one arm. The army outside moved again, boots stomping in perfect rhythm. The leash didn't even look at them, it just thought the command, and they obeyed. It spoke without words. Not English. Not Greek. Not anything human. But I understood. "You are unnecessary." And then the chains lashed out. I barely dodged, the iron slicing a brick wall like butter. Sparks rained down. My lungs were already burning. If I stayed, I was done. If I ran, I'd only delay it. The leash wasn't hunting me because it needed me. It was hunting me because I was the last reminder that once, it had a master. I staggered toward Broad Street, the leash breaking brick and glass behind me. Ares raged in my skull, "Stand, mortal. Meet it. If you fall in fear, war itself becomes famine. May whispered faintly through the static, hide. Buy me time. Every second you live is a chance to unmake it. Two voices. Two paths. And the leash, coming closer. I didn't stand and fight. Not yet. Not like Ares wanted. I ran. Broad streets lights cut across the smoke, and I hurled myself down the subway stairs 2 at a time. The smell of piss, damp concrete, and iron tracks slammed into me. The air was cooler, heavier. Behind me, the leash scraped against the stairwell walls, twisting its body thin again to follow. Its chains screeched like knives on steel. Turnstiles shattered as I leapt them, sprinting toward the platform. The sound of boots followed, not mine. The army above was shifting in rhythm to the leash's new beat. I felt their stomp echo through the concrete like war drums. I dropped onto the tracks, my palms slicing open on gravel. A light bloomed down the tunnel, a train. I should have feared it, but instead I felt relief. Cover. Motion. The leash dropped onto the rails behind me, sparks vomiting from its chain limbs against the electrified third rail. But it didn't flinch. War doesn't care about voltage. His voice thundered in my head, hot with fury. Coward. You shame me. War is not a thing you hide from, it is a fire you walk into, even knowing you'll burn. I clenched my teeth, running harder. I'm not trying to win, I hissed under my breath, I'm trying to live long enough for May to. A chain snapped forward, grazing my shoulder. Sparks lit the tunnel, and the heat of it seared my jacket. You think survival is victory? Ares bellowed. Survival without conquest is nothing but surrender. Her voice broke through faintly, shaky, urgent. Don't listen to him. You were right. Buy me time. I'm seeing something new in the writing. Static ripped through, then returned. It's not commanding the soldiers like you think. They're fragments. Memories. Every war that ever stained that ground. It's using them as a language. A boom of steel behind me, the leash slamming a chain into the tunnel wall, faster now, its pace quickening. The train barreled forward, brakes screaming, sparks flying. The headlights washed the leash's helm in blinding white. For one instant, I thought maybe it would be crushed. No. The leash stepped straight through the metal like it was smoke. The train cars buckled, twisted, screams erupting as passengers flung against windows. The leash emerged untouched on the other side, dragging fresh sparks from its chain limbs. And for the first time, I realized something worse than death. It wasn't just hunting me. It was recruiting. Every scream behind me joined the march of boots. Every panicked cry turned into another hollow soldier above, waiting to be deployed. Ahead, the subway tunnel split. Left was darker, older maintenance lines where no trains ran anymore. Right curved toward the next station, crowded, bright, alive. Left meant solitude. Right meant witnesses. Victims. Recruits. The leash scraped closer, its helm tilted, watching which path I'd choose. I went left. Not because it was safer. Not because it was smarter. Because the thought of leading that thing into a packed station, kids, tourists, drunk college kids stumbling home, was worse than dying alone in the dark. The old maintenance line yawned open like a throat. Damp air rushed over me, mold and copper thick on my tongue. The walls closed in fast, brick giving way to raw stone. My flashlight beam jittered over rusted pipes and collapsed supports. Behind me, the leash scraped its way after, slower now, deliberate. It knew I'd cornered myself. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. Even the city's heartbeat faded. No echo of traffic. No hum of power lines. Just the rasp of my breathing and the hiss of chain against stone. My flashlight flickered, then died. For a moment, I saw nothing black so thick it pressed against my eyelids. Then a faint orange glow began to pulse, rhythmic, steady. The leash's helm. Like a furnace left to burn in an abandoned mine. Ares whispered this time, no thunder, no bellow. Just a knife at my ear. You bury yourself like prey. You forget, tunnels are graves. And graves belong to me. I spat on the stone, voice ragged, not to you. Not anymore. You lost your leash. For a heartbeat, silence. Then laughter low, cruel, shaking the marrow in my teeth. You think it isn't mine still? Look closer, mortal. The leash was forged of me. You only gave it freedom. What you call rebellion is merely war in another mask. Her voice bled in, faint, distorted, like it was leaking from the stone. I see it now. The leash isn't rewriting rules, it's writing treaties. Each soldier, each fragment it absorbs, becomes part of its constitution. That's why it didn't kill you outright. You're in the text. You're still an unresolved clause. The leash clanged closer, every chain dragging. May, listen. If it sees you as unfinished, you can still negotiate. That's the only way people ever survived gods of war. Not by worship, not by battle. By treaty. The tunnel widened into an old maintenance chamber. Brick ceiling vaulted high, iron catwalks rusted to lace. In the middle of the floor sat a collapsed generator, coils and wires tangled like intestines. And waiting around it soldiers. Not hundreds. Not dozens. Just 7. But these weren't hollow. Their faces were too clear. A man in a Union uniform, jaw broken. A boy barely 20 in desert camo, eyes burned out. A woman in gray Confederate wool, her chest a black hole. All 7 stood in silence, weapons ready, waiting for the leash to step into the light. It didn't need to command them. They already knew. May whispered, that's not an army. That's its council. The leash's helm tilted toward me. The 7 raised their weapons. And I understood I was about to be put on trial. The chamber smelled of rust, mildew, and blood that wasn't fresh anymore. The 7 stood in silence, their bodies half-rotted but their eyes what eyes they had left burned like iron held too long in the forge. The leash hovered at their center, chains coiled into the cracked floor, its helm pulsing with that furnace light. When it moved, they didn't flinch. They were tied to it. Or maybe it was tied to them. I realized May was right. This wasn't a mob. It was a court. The Confederate woman raised her chin first, her words rasping like dry leaves. Name yourself. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I wanted to say nobody, to make myself small. But something in Alicia's glare told me silence was death. David Keller, I forced out. Security guard. Eastern State. The Union soldier sneered, jaw unhinged and swinging. Not soldier. Not oath-taker. Barely a man of war at all. Why does the leash carry your blood? I didn't answer right away. The leash hissed, chains tightening. Ares' voice slid into my head, colder than before. Say nothing of treaties. Claim dominion. If they think you weak, they'll consume you. You are blood to them. Nothing more. Her voice pushed faintly through the static, as though whispered through the dripping stone. Don't lie. Don't posture. You'll never beat war by pretending to be stronger. Negotiate. Give them something only you can give. The boy in desert camo stepped forward, his burned-out socket staring right into me. His voice cracked, childlike despite the horror of him. The leash seeks expansion. Every leash does. You carry unfinished blood. Tell us, what do you offer in treaty? The other 6 stared. The leash's helm bent low, chains hissing. I could hear my pulse in my ears. If I claimed power like Ares wanted, I might bluff my way into command if I survived. If I negotiated, like May said, I might make a pact that spared me but bound me tighter. Either way, I wasn't walking out untouched. The air was heavy enough to chew. Their gazes pressed into me like bayonets, waiting for me to puff up, to shout, to claim dominion like some tin soldier. I almost did. Ares' rage was still burning in my skull, daring me to bare my teeth. But then I saw the boy, what was left of him, waiting with that empty stare. He couldn't have been more than 19 when war carved him up. I wasn't going to posture to him. "I'm not your master," I said, voice shaking but steady enough. "I don't want to be. I don't want to command." The council didn't move. The leash's helm tilted, smoke bleeding from the sockets. "I can give you something else. Not conquest. Not slaughter." I swallowed hard. "I can give you continuity. A way to keep writing. Without burning the world down around you." The Confederate woman narrowed her ruined eyes. "Continuity." The Union soldier spat teeth onto the floor. "You would leash the leash?" It hissed. Chains rattled in the dark like snakes striking, but they didn't lash out. Not yet. Instead, the furnace glow in its helm brightened, pulsing like a heartbeat. It understood me. Not as master. Not as prey. As a clause. Her voice rushed in, quick and urgent. "Good. That's it. Don't fight them. Don't kneel either. Give them an option. They only understand contracts theory, soldiers bound to orders even after death. If you offer structure, you're not just blood anymore. You're precedent." The council stepped closer, weapons dragging sparks across stone. The boy in camo spoke again, voice small. "Continuity binds us to patience. War knows no patience." The leash's helm snapped toward him. A chain speared through his chest. The boy dissolved into smoke, his weapon clattering to the floor. The other 6 did not flinch. The leash turned back to me, helm burning brighter now. And in my head, not Ares, not mate. Continuity is acceptable. One chain uncoiled, slicing my forearm open. Not deep enough to cripple. Just enough for blood to spill. It dripped into the dirt, sizzling, spelling itself in letters I couldn't read. When it was done, the leash retracted. The council lowered their weapons. I'd signed something I couldn't yet see. Ares snarled in my skull, "Fool. You haven't saved yourself. You've given war a longer leash." May's voice, almost a whisper now, "You bought us time. That's more than anyone else has managed." The leash's helm dimmed, but its presence didn't fade. It hadn't spared me. It had included me. The leash didn't vanish when the clause was signed. It didn't retreat back into shadow. It uncoiled. Chains rattled down the maintenance tunnel, scraping stone and brick as it slithered away, not hunting me now, not yet, but stretching outward. Through cracks in the foundation. Through sewer grates. Through every rusted artery Philadelphia had buried beneath its streets. War was moving into the plumbing. The council dispersed like smoke in a draft. 6 shadows dissolving, leaving only the echo of their weapons clattering to the chamber floor. The leash's helm dimmed to a cold glow and sank into the tunnel floor as if melting back into earth. I was left alone with dripping stone, buzzing in my skull, and a cut still oozing down my arm. May's voice slipped through the tether, ragged. "You did it. You're alive. But David, look." I crawled back toward the subway platforms, hands stinging on wet concrete. By the time I surfaced, night had twisted into something else. Broad Street was crawling with people, not in panic but in perfect order. Hundreds of them. Men in work boots, women in scrubs still stained from the hospital shift, teenagers in hoodies marching. Not screaming. Not confused. Marching. Their eyes were flat, glassy. Their steps in rhythm. At every intersection, traffic froze. Engines cut. Horns didn't blare. The whole city was bending into formation. May's whisper was trembling. The claw's continuity. You gave it patience. You gave it infrastructure. It's not burning everything at once. It's building an army out of the living instead of the dead. Ares spat fire in my head. You fool. You've turned a slaughter into a campaign. A siege that will never end. I watched a woman in a septa uniform lift her hand in salute, eyes glassy. A boy with a backpack fell into rank beside her. 2 cops dropped their batons, pivoted into step without hesitation. It wasn't killing them. It was drafting them. And every face that passed turned slightly toward me. Not accusing. Not angry. Just aware. Like they knew I was in the treaty too. May's voice shook. David, we can still break this. But we'll need to dig into the origin. Eastern State, the first stones, the blood that seeped into that ground long before the prison. That's where the leash was born. Ares snarled over her, break it? No. Command it. You've already stepped into the vortex. Claim it now before it spreads beyond your filthy city. The march thundered past me, endless, as the leash's chains hissed under the pavement. I didn't step into the march. I couldn't. Watching those faces empty but alive, moving like they'd been rehearsing this parade their whole lives made my stomach turn. If I tested the treaty on them, even for a second, I'd be complicit. So I turned away. Back toward the one place where this all started. Back to Eastern State. The penitentiary loomed in the distance, jagged towers silhouetted against the city's haze. Even from blocks away, I could hear the scrape of chains under its stone belly. Every time I passed a drain or a cracked curb, I swore I saw sparks. The leash wasn't confined Anna Marie, it had threaded itself through the city's veins. But the heart was still there. Eastern State didn't look abandoned now. Its shadow stretched unnaturally far, and the air around it hummed like a power station. I slipped through the same side door I'd used 100 times. The air was colder, heavier, like every wall had been soaking up breath it was finally exhaling. The writing was everywhere. Not just in the cells, now across the floors, the ceilings, the old catwalks. Black marks carved deep, pulsing faintly red. The leash's contract was expanding, clause by clause. May's voice buzzed sharp in my ear. You're in the archive. Every stone is carrying a piece of the text. We need to find the first clause, the one that made this place more than just a prison. I headed toward Block 7, the lowest section, half collapsed, chained off even during tours. The closer I got, the louder the chains in the walls rattled. Not like pursuit. More like anticipation. The stairwell down was damp, stone slick with something darker than water. My flashlight beam caught names scratched into the wall, thousands of them, layer over layer, bleeding into each other. Inmates. Guards. Generations. And then one stood out. Not a name. A single phrase, etched deeper than the rest. All wars end here. The floor trembled. The leash's helm flared into view at the bottom of the stairs, half buried in earth and shadow. Not fully manifested. Waiting. May whispered, low, terrified, that's it. The first clause. The foundation of everything. The prison wasn't just a prison, it was a vow. Someone swore to lock war itself away. And they failed. Ares cut her off, roaring in my skull, failed. Or succeeded until you meddled. Claim it, mortal. Rewrite it. Bind the leash to conquest instead of chains. The words burned on the wall. The helm glowed below. My blood itched in my veins, the wound on my arm pulsing in rhythm with the chains. I could feel both paths yawning open in front of me. 1. Dig into the origin, find who carved that first clause, and maybe finish their work. 2. Seize the language of the vow and twist it into command, making the leash my weapon. Either way, the war wouldn't stay buried. I didn't try to rewrite it. Not yet. If there was one thing the leash had taught me, it was patience. I bent close to the stone, running my hand over the carved words. All wars end here. The letters were jagged, carved by hand, not machine. They cut so deep into the wall my fingertips came away bleeding. And beneath the words, almost hidden by moss and grime, was another line. Smaller. A signature. Warden Samuel Hart, 1831. May's voice cracked through, tight with awe. He wasn't just a warden. He was a veteran. The War of 1812. He carried what he saw into this place, and he tried to bury it under stone. Eastern State wasn't meant to punish criminals, it was meant to contain war itself. The chains hissed louder below, as if the leash was listening, mocking. His voice roared inside me, shaking bone. Contain war. Foolish dream. Men fight, always. He only made a tombstone to his own cowardice. Do you see now why gods are needed? Why I am needed? They build walls, I break them. That is balance. I spat blood onto the stone. Balance? You call this balance? You've turned a city into a parade ground. And it marches beautifully, doesn't it? The leash's helm brightened at the bottom of the stairs, smoke pulsing from its eye sockets. Its chains coiled, but it didn't strike. Not yet. Instead, it projected something onto the wall, images rippling across stone like film reels. Soldiers in blue coats, muskets clutched. A prison under construction, stone walls wet with mortar. Warden Hart himself, gaunt and wild-eyed, carving the vow into fresh mortar with a knife still bloody from war. And behind him, in the shadows, a shape like the leash. Watching. Waiting. May whispered, horrified. He didn't bind it. He invited it. Hart didn't bury war. He bargained with it. He gave it a home. The vow wasn't a lock. It was a lease. The leash wasn't born here. It was housed here. Given walls. Given continuity. And now I'd given it freedom. The helm tilted toward me, furnace glow flaring. The contract was unfinished. It was waiting for me to add my line. I stood frozen, bloodied fingertips hovering above Hart's inscription. The leash's helm leaned close, chains clattering, smoke hissing out like breath. It wasn't asking. It was waiting. In my pocket was the same blade I'd used to scratch rule lists into bathroom stalls and cell doors when panic got the better of me. I don't even remember pocketing it earlier, but there it was, heavy as iron. And in my head, the whisper grew louder, smoother than before. One line, mortal. One vow. Give me continuity, and I will never touch your blood again. You want order? Write it. Make me yours. Or I'll keep hunting May, the students, every soft throat behind these walls. Choose. May's hand clamped my arm. Don't. Don't you see? That's how it stays alive. That's how it's always stayed alive. Warden Hart. The keepers after him. The guards who broke down and swore it. Every damn one carved their vow, thinking they were buying peace. But they were just feeding it. Her eyes flicked to my bleeding hand. It wants you in the chain, too. She wasn't wrong. But neither was the leash. Every guard before me had broken. Hart tried to contain war, but ended up serving it. The leash had been passed hand to hand, oath to oath, century to century. And for the first time, it was offering choice. Not just compliance. Partnership. The knife's tip pressed into the wall, right beneath Hart's words. The stone felt soft, pliant, as if eager to drink what I had to give. I whispered the first words before I even realized I was speaking. "So long as I..." May slapped the blade from my hand, hard enough to split her palm open. Blood streaked the wall. The leash recoiled. The helm dimmed. The chains twisted in agitation, like a beast denied its meal. The wall drank it. Every drop. The new line shimmered into being, not from my hand, but from May's wound. "So long as blood denies, no vow may bind." Heart's words flared. Then May's words seared themselves right beneath. The leash shrieked metal on metal, like steel collapsing in fire. It wasn't banished. But it was interrupted. The helm toppled, chains spasming. The leash staggered down the hall like a drunk dragged by its own bindings, slamming into doors, into stone, cracking the old penitentiary with every blow. The vow was broken at least for tonight. May's blood had bought us that. She leaned against me, pale, but smiling through her pain. "You were about to put your neck in its collar," she rasped. "Now it has to wait. Now it has to find another way." The leash's roar echoed through the penitentiary, rattling the bones of every wall. This wasn't over. Not even close. But for the first time I hadn't just followed the rules. We'd changed them. May's blood vow burned fresh on the wall, still steaming when I left her resting in the infirmary cot. The leash's shrieks hadn't stopped echoing through the penitentiary. They just moved further down, into old cell blocks where the stone was weakest. And me? I needed answers. Not scraps. Not rules written by ghosts or carved by desperate men. I needed to know why Samuel Hart, first warden of Eastern State, chose to shackle war itself inside these walls. May had whispered them both before passing out. 1. Hart's records. She'd seen whispers in the archive's military reports, wartime journals locked in city collections. Pages that never made it into textbooks, maybe because they talked about gods, not tactics. 2. The living warden. A retired keeper, one of the last from before the penitentiary shut down in '71. A man rumored to be alive in West Philly, half blind and half drunk. The kind of survivor who muttered rules under his breath in grocery lines, as if he'd never left. I couldn't shake the image of Hart carving that first vow with a bloodied knife. Whatever bargain he struck it was the root. The leash's lease began with him. So I pulled strings, called a friend at the free library, and by midnight I had a folder smuggled out of special collections. Yellowed reports. Personal correspondence. Things Hart never meant for guards like me to see. What the pages said. 1814. Hart was a captain during the burning of Washington. His men wrote of him speaking to a soldier not born of any regiment, clad in bronze that shone like fire. He promised victory but demanded witness. Hart survived a massacre no one else walked away from. And afterward, he wrote in his journal, "The god of war has no throne. Only leash. If he follows me, then I will build him a prison so vast his hunger will never reach beyond it." He didn't come home just scarred. He came home followed. Hart didn't bind Aries. He lured the leash, gave it a cage, and fed it the guilty, the damned, the forgotten. Eastern State wasn't justice. It was rations. As I closed the folder, the prison groaned like it knew what I'd uncovered. The leash slammed a cell door 2 blocks down, the sound carrying like cannon fire. And Ares whispered, clear as thunder in my chest. "Do you see why mortals are useless jailers? He promised me a cage, but built me a feast hall. And you will decide if it stays open or starves." The folder slipped from my hands. The last page fell open on its own. Hart's handwriting again. "If I fail, let the next keeper remember this. The leash only obeys blood that knows its own guilt." Hart's words burned on the page. The leash only obeys blood that knows its own guilt. I sat there in the guard shack, the folder spread across the desk like a crime scene, my hands shaking. Because the leash wasn't after vows this time. It wanted confession. The air turned hot, coppery, like breath on the back of my neck. Chains scraped against the penitentiary walls in rhythm, like a war drum. "Speak it," Ares whispered through me. "Your shame. The rot in your marrow. Offer it, and I will leash myself to you as I once leashed to heart. Every war needs a general. Every leash needs a hand." I almost spoke. Almost let it spill out, the thing I'd carried since before I ever set foot in this place. It wasn't some grand atrocity. Not a battlefield sin like hearts. Just a night when I let a man die because stepping forward meant getting hurt myself. I never told anyone. Not May. Not my family. Not even myself when the lights were off. But the leash knew. It always knew. The infirmary door banged open. May limped in, her palm still bandaged from when she bled on the wall. Her eyes locked on mine. "Don't say it," she hissed. Her voice wasn't pleading. It was sharp, commanding, like she knew what it would cost. "Once you name guilt aloud in here," she said, "it stops belonging to you. It belongs to him. That's how Hart lost. That's how every keeper after him lost." The leash slammed against cell block 9 so hard dust rained down from the rafters. The old stone cracked like gunfire. I could feel it waiting for me to open my mouth, tongue heavy, teeth buzzing with words I couldn't swallow. May grabbed the folder, shoved Hart's journal page at me. "Read the rest. Luke says the leash obeys guilt. But nowhere does he say you have to give it. Obeying isn't the same as owning." That hit like lightning. Maybe Hart had misread it. Maybe all of them had. Maybe you didn't surrender guilt to survive. Maybe you forced the leash to recognize it, without ever letting go of it. My guilt was mine. Not his. And if I held it, gripped it tight instead of confessing it, maybe that's how I stayed outside his collar. The helm screamed through the blocks, chains flailing like storm winds. It had expected me to confess. To give. But I stayed silent. And for the first time, the leash recoiled. Not defeated, just denied. May slumped beside me, exhausted but grinning. "You didn't feed it. That's new. That's something." But I could feel Ares still burning in my chest, furious, his voice molten. "You will choke on that guilt, mortal. And when you beg to be rid of it, you will beg for me." For now, silence had saved me. But silence won't last forever. The penitentiary had gone quiet. Not safe quiet. Not peaceful. The kind of quiet you only get when something bigger than you is listening for you to slip. May wanted me to wait, to hunt down the old ex-warden in West Philly. She said we needed a survivor's account, proof that Hart's vow could be turned against the leash. But silence had bought me a heartbeat of power. And I needed to know if it was real. So I went to cell block 9. Every step echoed like I was carrying a coffin on my back. The cells leaned inward, doors half collapsed, rusted bars glowing faint red from the helm's light deeper in. The leash wasn't hiding. It was waiting. Chains twitched along the floor like snakes. The helm floated near the far end, ember eyes locked on me. The urge to speak gnawed at me. Confess. Admit. Release. That's what it wanted. But I pressed my teeth together, jaw aching, lips sealed until I tasted blood. I let the guilt sit inside me like a burning coal. Not offered. Not denied. Just carried. The leash strained against itself. The helm flickered, dimmed, brightened again. The chains rattled, testing every crack in the stone. Then it stopped. Just stopped. The helm tilted like a dog cocking its head, studying me. The fire in its eyes cooled to embers. And for the first time, it didn't advance. It withdrew. Back into the shadows of the cell block, smoke curling like retreating storm clouds. When I turned back, I saw it scratched into the dust at my feet, etched by one of the chains before it vanished. You hold. For now. Back in the shack, May shook her head at the words I'd copied into my notebook. That's not victory, she said. That's a stalemate. And Ares doesn't lose. He just waits until you're too tired to keep holding. She tapped the last page of Hart's file. If you want more than a pause, we still need him, the old warden. He's the only living man who's carried this thing and walked away. The leash had respected silence. But silence couldn't build walls. May wanted me to find the old warden. But the leash wasn't giving me months, or even weeks. Its patience was a blade pressed to my throat. Every night I held my silence, and every night it pressed harder. The chains didn't sleep. Neither did I. So I went back to the wall. Back to Hart's vow. The stone still held his words, blackened from time and soot. All wars end here. And beneath them, May's bloodline. So long as blood denies, no vow may bind. But there was space below. Space waiting for me. I could feel the wall humming, begging. It wasn't Hart's prison anymore. It wasn't Ares' cage anymore. It was mine. I pressed the knife into my palm until blood welled. Then I carved slow, deliberate, each stroke shaking the walls around me. So long as I walk, war walks chained. The stone drank the blood as I cut. The vow burned, brighter than Hart's, brighter than May's. The leash erupted from the shadows, helm screaming, chains thrashing. But when it struck the wall, the vow flared like iron gone white hot. And the chains snapped back, not into me, not into Hart's memory, but into the vow itself. The leash writhed, slammed into the stone, and for the first time since I'd taken this job it stopped. The helm flickered, ember eyes dimming. The chains coiled tight against the vow, anchoring there like shackles welded into the wall. It still existed. But now it wasn't fed. Now it wasn't free. It was bound to the words I chose. In my chest, his voice burned low, resentful, but not triumphant anymore. So long as you stand, I am leashed. Pray you never fall, mortal, for when your walk ends, the chains break. May leaned against the doorway, weak but smiling. You didn't confess. You didn't surrender. You rewrote. She was right. Hart built a cage. I built a chain. And now the leash belongs to me, at least for as long as my legs can carry me. If anyone ever reads this. If you ever take a job that pays too much for too little work. Remember this. You don't win by playing their rules. You win by writing your own. And if you hear the chains at Eastern State rattle again, pray I'm still walking.